Good afternoon. Today is February 23rd. Welcome to the hearings of the Ways and Means Committee. First, we will call House Bill 706 with Madam Speaker and County Executive Olszewski. Please come up. Welcome, Madam Speaker.
Thank you for having us.
Whenever you're ready.
Oh, okay. Good afternoon, Chair Atterbury, Vice Chair Wilkins, and the members of the Ways and Means Committee. For the record, I'm Speaker Adrian Jones. I'm here to testify in support of House Bill 706, which would establish a $5 million statewide business facade improvement program. As the bill title suggests, this program will provide grants to assist businesses in rehabilitating their storefronts. While we have other state programs that provide support for storefronts on our main streets, this program will focus on those businesses that may not be directly in a historic downtown location or in a building identified for historic preservation. Not every business that is important to a community is located on a main street. Not every business that is important to a community is located in a historic building. Many of these businesses are in older commercial districts and business corridors that feel left behind in the cycle of development. Each of you can think of a small business in your district that could use this support. The kind of family-run business that still services thriving middle-class neighborhoods and families. The kind of business that holds communities and corridors together. Not all those businesses are able to prioritize sprucing up their facade over other business needs. This program is meant to give those businesses that little bit of support to improve area property values and make our communities more visually appealing to our residents and visitors. I think this is an important economic development tool to lift up older neighborhoods and communities. Along with other targeted resources, we can and should be investing these dollars in small, local businesses that need our help. Thank you for your time, and I urge a favorable report for House Bill 706. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Atterbury, Vice Chair Wilkins, members of the Ways and Means Committee, Baltimore County Executive Johnny Olszewski. Thrilled to be back where I started my career, here in the Ways and Means Committee. Alongside our Speaker, Adrian Jones, in support of House Bill 706. Just to add to what the speakers already presented, I mean, we've had the opportunity across Baltimore County to have conversations with these businesses that have been, frankly, pillars of the community for decades. I mean, these are the owners who hire our local high school students to work. They're the ones who are sponsoring our little leagues. And frankly, you know, they are viable businesses that have been there for a long time, but ultimately don't necessarily always have the resources to make these facade improvement investments that really make a big difference for the quality of our communities. So I want to applaud the Speaker for bringing forward this legislation, not only having the funding in place, but also thinking creatively about ways in which to do it, addressing communities that may have not been eligible for these kinds of awards in the past under existing programs. I think it's very innovative to put this funding with the Department of Commerce to help address these communities. We know that the impact is real. We know that it's meaningful for our communities. We've seen in similar programs that the demand outpaces the funding, but I assure you that with my colleagues in local government, other county executives, commissioners, council members, we're all ready to put this money to good use in partnership with all of you, with our business community. So we applaud, again, the speaker for bringing this legislation forward. We think this will make a significant improvement to communities across Maryland. This is not a Baltimore County thing. I think every community can, as the speaker said, you can think of a business that would benefit from this. So I'm here to also just urge a favorable vote on House Bill 706. I thank you for the time and the opportunity to join you today.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for Madam Speaker or the County Executive? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much. And that concludes the testimony on House Bill 706. Next, House Bill 678. Madam Speaker Pro Tem, come on up. And I have a list of people, but is there anyone you specifically, whoever you want to bring up with you? Okay.
To Farmers and Mr. Colby Ferguson. Okay. Good afternoon, Chair Atterbury and Vice Chair Wilkins. I am Delegate Cherie Sample Hughes before you today for House Bill 678, which is entitled Sales and Use Tax Electricity for Agricultural Purposes. As many of you are aware, I hail from a strong agricultural community and just know and have been over the years that I've been growing up and living there, that agriculture is the root and the foundation of a lot of our area on the Eastern Shore. With that being said, we also are aware that agriculture is the largest commercial industry in the state of Maryland, yielding millions. And so to that end, it's really effective to our economy, and that we try to do our very best to ensure that we have tools that are proper to help our farming community so they can continue to provide the products that they do here in the state of Maryland. Many of us love chicken. Many of us love all types of food that comes from our farmers. And so to that end, I'm here today to just speak to you on one issue in particular. Currently, only our farming operations are tied to residential meters and are exempt from paying sales and use tax on electricity. So most chicken houses that were built after 2010 are tied to a commercial meter and thus still pay sales and use tax. Such exemptions already exist for manufacturers. This includes facilities owned by Purdue Farms, where the farm's crop is processed. It also exempts companies like Dark Container, which is located in Caroline County, for instance, as another manufacturer, and they actually manufacture the plates that the chicken is on. They have an exemption already in this space. So as you can ascertain, what this bill is attempting to do is to right some wrongs and to bring some farmers in line with this same eligibility that has been allowed to manufacturers and other farming equipment as well. What you'll hear today from the persons that will testify before you will also speak to the fiscal note that we just received and learned that it is some highly, let's find another word, controversial, or it's quite different. It doesn't speak specifically to what the numbers, the true numbers are with the number of farms in the state of Maryland. So to that end, I don't want that to be something that, you know, raises a lot of eyebrows, because what is there before you is a fiscal note that really needs some attention and some true understanding, but the Farm Bureau will shed some light on that. So ultimately, at the end of the day, House Bill 678 will provide a level of support for our farmers by offsetting the electricity that they have been paying to produce, you know, the chickens, the many other industry items that they use for electricity, because what you also hear is our farmer will speak about that some of his houses are already linked to his house, and so he's not paying tax, but then it's already an issue because the other houses that he has on his property, he is paying this electricity tax. So we just want to really be consistent with what we're doing, and I believe that this bill speaks to that. So I ask for a favorable report on House Bill 678. Grayson.
Would ever like to go next for 2 minutes, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Grayson Middleton. I'm the Government Affairs Manager for Delmarva Chicken Association, the 1,600-member trade organization representing chicken growers, allied companies, and businesses, and the chicken companies. We are here today in support of House Bill 678. The bill would essentially correct an oversight in tax law that would make the sales and use tax exemption on electricity fair and beneficial for farmers across the state. For years, the state has legislated under the philosophy that inputs for food production and manufacturing should not be taxed. This includes electricity for farming operations on a residential meter, as well as the large processing plants that harvest our chickens. Unfortunately, this exemption does not cover farming operations under a commercial rate. And since 2010, it has become required by electric suppliers that our chicken growers tie their chicken houses to a commercial meter, separate from the residential one. One of the greatest input costs to our chicken growers is electricity. The average electric bill on a Maryland chicken farm is around $30,000. That means this legislation could amount to a savings of over $1,800 per grower. These are savings that can be used to upgrade the farm, implement best management practices, or just pay for their children's sports. I am sure this committee has had the opportunity to review the fiscal note. Unfortunately, DLS made a couple of incorrect assumptions on their research, which my colleague Colby Ferguson will expand upon in his testimony. Let's level the playing field and give this group of hardworking growers the same exemption as their peers and the companies that harvest their birds. We urge a favorable report on HB 678. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name's Scott Hipkins. I'm a former dairy farmer in Frederick County, and we farm about 800 acres in the southern end of the county. We have on our farm 4 meters, and we used to, like I said, used to dairy. Now we are a beef and grain operation and not using anywhere near as much as electricity as we were. So we have 4 meters on the farm, and I'm speaking to the inconsistencies that they're talking about. The lowest that I pay on 1 meter is 6.537 cents per kilowatt hour. And the main meter, which has the farm and the farmhouse on it, I'm paying 19.356 cents per kilowatt hour on. So there's a major difference. And I would say the amount of electricity on the main farm, 75% of it is the residency. I don't know how we're supposed to farm with things all over the board like this. Anything else you want, Colby?
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Lindsay Thompson, here today on behalf of the Maryland Grain Producers Association and also as a grain farmer. My husband and I decided it was a good idea to also become farmers in 2020, and something else happened in 2020, right? That made a lot of the input costs rise exponentially. So we are here today in favor of this bill, and thank you very much to Delegate Sample Hughes for putting this in. You may remember this bill was also in last year, also sponsored by Delegate Ludke, who understood the importance of this to the agricultural industry. I'm going to speak to the grain production impacts. So you heard about chickens. We produce the grain that feeds those chickens. And during harvest, we oftentimes use grain dryers in order to reduce the moisture content in that grain so that it can be ground for feed or stored. So many of our farmers have their grain drying facilities on their farmstead tied to a commercial meter. And those that are using electricity to dry that grain during harvest not only see an exponential increase in the cost of their electricity bill, but they are also seeing that 6% sales and use tax on and above that. I did an informal poll of some of our members over on the Eastern Shore, and that additional 6% is costing them anywhere between $300 and $700 additional a month on some of the harvest seasons. And so we are just asking that agricultural electricity is put in the same category, not only as production and manufacturing, but also other agricultural inputs are already tax exempt. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Colby Ferguson on behalf of Maryland Farm Bureau. And I'm just throwing out my original testimony because I want to focus on the fiscal note we got this morning. And we did, Grayson actually had a chance to talk with the fiscal note writer this morning, and so we could verify how they came up with the really, really high number. And his assumption was that all farmers, all 12,400 farms in the state were currently paying sales and use tax, which we know about 85% of them don't. So the $6.5 million fiscal note would be for if everybody did. But when we actually look at, so like Mr. Hipkins down there, he left out the main thing I wanted to talk about, which is that he has 4 meters. He pays tax on 3 of them and doesn't pay tax on the other one. So he's one of those exceptions to the rule that actually has more than 1 meter. I told him he needs to call Potomac Edison and figure out why he's paying all different wacky rates to fix that too. But on my farm, I have a 52-acre farm in northern part of the Frederick County, and I'm on residential, so my barn and everything runs right back into my home meter, and so I don't pay sales and use tax. So I'm one of the many farms that don't. And so so that kind of takes care of the fiscal note, but why do we already have, so in current law, General Tax Article 11-207, there are exemptions made for electricity for different ones. So that's the law where electricity for residential, like probably all of you, if you check your meters, your bills, you'll see that you don't pay sales and use tax. But then there's also exemptions for non-residential and commercial use. And it specifically says electricity, fuel, utilities used to operate machinery or equipment predominantly used for production activity is exempt from sales and use tax. And so that's where the manufacturing component comes into. So as what Scott was talking about, he uses his electricity for those components for producing food. And so we're just trying to clarify and clean this up today. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Delegate Hornberger.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And to Grayson, happy 100th year anniversary on the broiler industry of chicken. Came down to that event. That was very helpful there in Delaware. We have a number of newer farms in Cecil County that have gone to the CAFO model, and they've actually gone the organic route, which needs a larger footprint, uses more electricity, there's a lot more input cost, just because the market now is moving in the direction of organic. I know you talked about traditional chicken houses, but this tax credit, parity, whatever you want to refer to it as, it would include the organic grow houses as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, go ahead, Grayson.
Yes, Delegate, it would.
Okay, so the free-range chickens are all set then. Okay, thank you so
They
much.
are.
Appreciate that, Madam Chair.
Any other questions for this panel? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much. There's some other folks signed up to testify. Renee Harris. Oh, okay.
Chair, so she was signing me up.
Okay, we do have someone virtually, Will McNatt. Grayson, you have an awesome name. My oldest son's name is Grayson. Whenever you're ready, Mr. McNatt.
Thank you for your time. My name is Will McNatt. My family has been growing chickens since 2006. And 2023 actually marks the 50-year anniversary of my father buying our first initial piece of farmland. I've enjoyed working in the agriculture industry for basically my entire life. We own 9 chicken houses and grow on average 1.1 million chickens per year from Mount Air Farms. However, within the past couple years, with the current inflation and rising input costs across the board, it has become extremely tough to keep our family business running while maintaining a comfortable profit margin. We farmers use exemptions for most of our input costs, including seed, fertilizer, and fuel. Passing House Bill 678 would help us add an exemption for electricity as well. Please help correct this oversight that would allow all poultry producers in Maryland to be treated equal. Every little bit helps. Personally, this would save my business alone an estimated $3,000 per year. Passing House Bill 678 would help all poultry farmers. Please help us get this accomplished. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. McNatt? Okay, seeing none, thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker Pro Tem, and that concludes the testimony in the bill hearing, House Bill 678. Calling my lovely double sister, House Bill 680, Delegate Tolles, please come forward. And is Mr. Enton coming forward with you?
Yes. They got heavy chairs. They got nice, expensive chairs and Ways and Means. Okay. Wonderful.
Whenever you're ready.
Okay. Good. Good afternoon, Chair Atterbury, Vice Chair Wilkins, and members of the Ways and Means Committee. I ask for your favorable report on House Bill 680, Student Loan Debt Relief Tax Credit Alterations. And I would be remiss if I did not again shout out the chair of the Legislative Black Caucus in Maryland, where this is a priority bill for us. Abolitionist Frederick Douglass, a great Marylander, said, "Education means emancipation. It means light and liberty. It means the uplifting of the soul of man, and woman, into the glorious light of truth, the light by which men and women can only be made free." Education, including higher education, has always been a priority of the legislatures and Marylanders across the state. Getting an education is a tool for success, but unfortunately for many, it has been cost prohibitive. House Bill 680 will be a key tool in providing financial relief for Marylanders who are burdened with student loan debt. It will also support our broader goal of rebuilding state government by targeting institutions that have been historically overlooked. There are a few amendments to this bill. With those amendments, the bill does a few things. It extends the time taxpayers can use the credit from 2 years to 3 years. Loan repayments start 6 months post-graduation. However, it takes time to find employment, pass exams, I know Madam Chair know that bar exam, and other barriers that can get in the way of quickly repaying the loan servicer. Increasing the time from 2 to 3 years would allow for borrowers more time to repay the loan. Number 2, it doubles the amount the Maryland Higher Education Commission can approve from $9 million to $18 million. According to the Maryland Higher Education, Marylanders are applying for this loan reimbursement in record numbers. Increasing the allotment will allow more borrowers to take advantage of the program, especially state workers who need to fill these critical vacant positions in our state government. Number 3, it prioritizes state employees who graduated from institutions where at least 40% of students are Pell Grant recipients. This does 2 things. It targets the workers who need the tax credit the most, and it incentivizes students from colleges and universities that have been historically disfranchised and overlooked to work in state government. Finally, it makes outreach a key component in the success of this program. The bill requires MHAC to establish a marketing plan by 2024 so more students can know about the program. It requires MHAC to inform state employees of the loan reimbursement benefit, and it encourages higher education institutions to tell new borrowers and graduates about the program. House Bill 680 supports the Speaker's priority to rebuild state government by better investing in current state employees and targeting new talent in institutions that have been historically left behind. This will ensure we build Marylanders better and stronger than ever. And in your packet, you would notice there are letters of support from other colleges as well within our state. Thank you to my lovely double sister for your time, Madam Chair. I ask that you and your committee vote favorable in support of House Bill 680, and I'm open to any questions you may have. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Enton?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Robert Enton on behalf of the Maryland Bankers Association. I'm really pleased to be here today to support Delegate Toll's bill. You may recall several weeks ago, I came in front of the committee and testified in favor of legislation for financial literacy. It was the Speaker Pro Tem's bill. And this is part of the Maryland Bankers Association's recognition of how important financial literacy is to our citizens and particularly to our younger people, and frankly, particularly in typically underserved communities. There's nothing worse than, as a young person, not understanding the importance of establishing a banking relationship, not understanding how important it is, more than anything else, to make sure that if you're going to borrow money, that you're going to be able to afford to repay it and that you do repay it. Because the failure to make payments on loans will hang around your neck for years and years afterwards. And I even know this from my own children when they graduated from college and had credit cards and had student debt. So having a program that will assist people, particularly young people, in making their education and repaying their loans is a top priority for Maryland Bankers Association. Met at length with the sponsor, and I'm really pleased to be here to support this legislation. Would urge you to give it a favorable report. I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the committee? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to also recognize your Link sisters that are here
Yes.
to hear you, to see you chair, and to listen to this bill. And
Thank you.
Delegate Edith Patterson is sitting next to you. She is. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, and that concludes the testimony on House Bill 680, and now I will call House Bill 781, my bill. And I would ask that my first panel come forward: Troy Lamel Stovall, David White, Brad Phillips, and Kelly Schultz. And my Link sister Edith will take over.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Would you please proceed? House Bill 781.
Thank you, committee. I'm Chair Atterbury, and I'm here to ask for your support on House Bill 781, ask for your favorable support for the Maryland Equitech Growth Fund and Commission. Maryland is not growing its economy, its tech economy, at the rate that we should. And because of this, this body in 2022 requested of TEDCO specifically to conduct a study looking at the state's tech economy and develop a strategy on how to create more diversity in the industry and how to get more entrepreneurs in the industry. And we also asked TEDCO to put together draft legislation, and this is exactly what you have before us. In the study, what did TEDCO find? TEDCO found that we could be doing much better, which is why we asked them to do the study, because I think we knew that that's what they would find. Maryland could, in fact, be a national leader in this area because we are already so rich in assets. We're rich in our colleges and our universities, our federal agencies, life sciences, and we're rich in our diversity. But we're not doing a good job in leveraging these resources. We're not doing a good job in providing a platform for young entrepreneurs to get into this industry. And specifically, we're not doing a great job in reflecting the diversity of our state in this economy. And so that's specifically what this legislation is for. It's to change the narrative in that industry for people of color and for young entrepreneurs. So with that, I am going to turn it over to the panel that is more expert than me and ask Mr. Troy Lamel-Stovall to please take it over. He is, if you don't know, the head of TEDCO.
Thank you, Chair Atterbury, and thank you for your leadership and your sponsorship. I am Troy Lamel-Stovall. I humbly serve as the CEO of TEDCO. And I also want to thank all of you that have been co-sponsors of this bill. We were asked to lead this, but let me tell you, the leadership to do this is going to come from the ecosystem. And that's what you see today and the sponsors of this. But let me quote the governor, if I may, that we're asset rich and strategy poor. So that's why we're asking for the fund in the commission, because we need both. We need the commission to begin to study what we should be doing and need to be doing, and we need the fund to make the scale investments that are required for us to be a strategic and technology leader. And let me close with 4 S's that we talk about at TEDCO. We've got to scale differently. We're competing against other states that are investing billions of dollars. We've got to cooperate better or stitch together in a different way. We got to use metrics in a different way to storytell better. And then the 4th S, we got to create a higher level of stickiness. That's the whole point of this. We have to create and start companies, have them stay here in Maryland far longer than they've been staying. And so why are we doing all this, as Chair Atterbury pointed out? Because our high-tech job growth numbers are 1.6%. The average is 4%. The difference in that equates to almost 90,000 jobs, well-paying jobs, many of which do not require a college degree. That is why we're here. That's why I'm asking for your favorable support of House Bill 781. And so if I may also, Kelly Schultz could not be here. Kelly is, I think you all know, is the chair of the CEO of the Maryland Tech Council. They are in favor of this. They've submitted some testimony, but she had another thing come up with an amendment that they be added to the commission, which we are in support of. So thank you for her support.
Well, good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the Ways and Means Committee. It's a pleasure to be here today. My name is Brad Phillips. I'm the Executive Director for the Maryland Association of Community Colleges, here in full support in representing my 16 community college members behind this legislation. Maryland, you've already heard it from everybody on the panel, is asset rich, and we benefit from having some of the most biggest investments in research and development in any state, from NIH to Research One, R1 universities. But what happens when that research gets to the commercial phase, where it could really be productive for Maryland's economy? The workforce isn't prepared. We think this is an opportunity to really align with what the workforce needs coming into this innovative economy and use community college students. We're one of the most diverse higher education segments in the state of Maryland. And typically, there's not that opportunity. But with this commission and with this resources, I think we could have a strong alignment with what the business community needs in this high-tech field and provide the workforce. Because what happens when that doesn't work out is employers have to go to your competitor states. And they benefit from all of that research and development that has taken place in Maryland. So we just urge you to ask for a favorable report on this legislation, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and the rest of the council. Tomorrow's Bio Today is a research and development company located in Somerset County that focuses on using innovative technologies such as an ingestible camera tablet for livestock endoscopies/colonoscopies to reduce the cost on farmers and to allow American farmers to have a better idea of their livestock's health conditions. Tomorrow's Bio Today supports House Bill 781 as the bill provides more Marylanders with the resources to create technology innovation and also provide the resources in the lower income and rural parts of Maryland where youth can be trained for the jobs of tomorrow. Maryland is a very diverse state. The Equitech Growth Fund will enable Maryland to access untapped talent in underserved communities through more inclusiveness and equity. I believe this will foster an environment of greater tolerance and respect across the state. Such an environment will not only attract Maryland's greatest assets, its innovators, but also attract the attention of outside companies that do not feel fairly represented in their current region. Maryland's research institutions are world-renowned, but the fruits of that research in the form of new products being developed, often by startup companies, can easily be moved to other states if Maryland does not build up the infrastructure and workforce to support their development. As a business owner in the rural part of Maryland, I need skilled talent in the region to scale my business. House Bill 781 will help generate that workforce for entrepreneurs like me that we will need in the future. For these reasons, I support House Bill 781 and urge the passage of this important legislation. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this panel. Are there any questions? If not, I do have a question of either Mr. Stovall or Mr. Phillips. In terms of tapping or working with public schools or schools per se, we know there are a lot of technical schools within the state of Maryland. What role or partnerships currently exist or will exist with those entities? I know you're with a community college, which is great, but I know they also have sometimes early college and opportunities like that.
Well, you're right. I think this does provide a better opportunity for us to align our programs, whether they be in continuing education, licensure, and certifications, with what the needs are of the startup economy, and actually be able to align what we have to offer to fit what employers are telling us to do. Right now, we're doing that, but it's not in a streamlined sort of where we all have a North Star guiding us. It's usually within our regional and local workforce economies that we're working with the industries that exist to build that partnerships and collaboration. I think this is the next level way to align those goals.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, agreed. I think, look, the money is important, don't get me wrong, but the commission is also very important. We've got to have a strategy. We've got to have a clarity to the North Star. Because otherwise we're just making investments. In other words, the competitive posture of other states has a clarity to their strategy and a clarity to their investment thing. Now, to your specific question, Delegate Patterson, absolutely. We see opportunities reaching down into the middle school and high school level, exposing them to opportunities in entrepreneurship and innovation, what that really is like, and creating pathways for them to see that as well. I think you wanted to speak to it.
Yes, so just to jump in there, so in Somerset County, what we've done at our middle school and high school level for 7th graders, we have them come over to our technical high school, and they would do that for a semester, and they would go through all the classes. That would enable them to get a feel to see if they like any of our, our tech school programs, such as culinary arts, automotive, business classes, things like that, and nursing. And then we do it again at 9th grade. So that by the time they get to 10th grade, they can easily transition into our tech programs. We've noticed over the past 5 years, we've had about 40% jump in students who are able to leave our halls and go and get actual jobs in the workforce. Whereas other counties may be lacking behind, Somerset is improving in that aspect. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. We're ready for testimony from Graham Dodge, Chrissy Reichel, and Drew Jabin. And thank you for the testimony of those who are just leaving. Okay. Mr. Dodge, you may proceed.
Thank you. Rural entrepreneurs are, quite frankly, a flight risk to our state's economy, which is why I support House Bill 781, Maryland Equitech Growth Fund and Commission. My name is Graham Dodge, and I'm the Executive Director of the Mid-Atlantic Gigabit Innovation Collaboratory, or MAGIC for short, based in Westminster, Carroll County. House Bill 781 will provide much-needed support throughout Maryland with equitable financing and resources for both minority and rural entrepreneurs. Rural communities like where I live in Westminster are more likely to be transient, with higher paid workers commuting out while lower paid workers commute in, creating bedroom communities for wealthier citizens while our main streets remain depressed with less opportunities for those working within them. MAGIC is addressing this issue by building a rural tech ecosystem from the ground up in Carroll County. We have created programs that teach everything from cybersecurity to game development to our rural students and connect them with job opportunities. But there is a gap in resources to grow these students into entrepreneurs or to support existing entrepreneurs who may regularly be commuting elsewhere. For example, Magic is developing the Autonomous Robotics Innovation Center, where local industry partners will work with students to drive innovation in connected autonomous robotics. But the next step would be to show these students how to turn their ideas into businesses. The funding from this bill can help support programs like these to ensure that we keep these future technology leaders in our rural communities so that they have the opportunity to raise venture capital from within their own startup ecosystems rather than leave for others. For these reasons, I support House Bill 781 and urge passage of this important legislation. Thank you.
Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, and members of the committee. My name is Christy Weiskill, and on behalf of Johns Hopkins University in Medicine, I am pleased to support House Bill 781. The premise of this bill is this: Maryland is a state of incredible assets, as Troy mentioned. If you look at our density of research funding, technology assets, and talent, especially in STEM, you'd imagine that we would have been a top tech sector. But in fact, our sector is immature relative to its full potential. We have opportunities that are struggling and a mismatch of jobs and workforce for the jobs of the future. We cannot have a growing economy without a strong tech sector. I challenge you to name a thriving region without tech at its core, because tech is where the jobs are, and jobs lift regions. To be competitive with these other markets, we cannot rely on raw assets alone, as you have heard. We must invest in infrastructure. Massachusetts has done this and reported a 1.7 ROI on their billion-dollar investment. Take Johns Hopkins University alone, where I run the commercialization division. Johns Hopkins has ranked #1 for 42 years in a row on the size of federal research expenditure. I run one of the busiest tech transfer offices in the country with nearly 500 new reports of invention each year. Our portfolio of startups has raised nearly $4 billion since 2014, of which over $2 billion has flowed into the state. If $2 billion has flowed into the state, that means that more than half of the capital has left the state as companies take root elsewhere. We are doing as much as we can to retain high-growth companies, but I want to share a cautionary tale. One of our companies that occupies lab space has opened an office in Palo Alto. They are committed to being here, but there simply is not lab space and talent. For these reasons, I urge a favorable report on House Bill 781.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Drew Jabin on behalf of the Maryland Bankers Association. I'd really like to thank the sponsor and TEDCO for bringing this forward. We are strongly in support of House Bill 781. MBA members, our banks are partners in their local economies. We are directly interested in the economic growth, health, and vitality of the communities in this state. I believe you all have our written testimony. I know you all have a lot on the docket today, so I won't take too much of your time, but I do want to recommend that you please read our written testimony and our member bank, Fulton Bank, submitted testimony. They are extremely excited about this bill. Banks have been at the forefront of significant technological innovations in the past decades, including the national ATM effort, network, the development of 24-hour call centers for banks, mobile banking, online banking. So we're really excited about this. We look forward to partnering with TEDCO on this, and we respectfully ask for a favorable report. Happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for this panel? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much. That concludes the testimony on House Bill 781. Next, calling Delegate Fisher. Welcome to Ways and Means. House Bill 730. Bye, Mom.
Good morning, Madam Chairwoman and members of the esteemed Ways and Means Committee. For the record, my name is Delegate Mark Fisher, District 27C, Calvert County, Maryland. The best county in the state, of course. Before you is House Bill 730, and House Bill 730 is a constitutional amendment which it's going to alterate and the rate of taxation and it's required, of course, for us to vote on this. Basically, this bill puts into the Constitution of Maryland that every time a tax increases or a tax decreases, that we, the representatives in this great republic, are supposed to actually vote accordingly. That matters, right? Delegate Lewis got up the other day on the floor and indicated that if you're in your seat, you have to vote. That's a great rule. Because obviously, if you're on the floor of the House of Delegates and you might have to go to the restroom or you might have a meeting or something. But if you're in your seat, you should be voting, because that's a solemn responsibility that we take. It's also a solemn responsibility that when we are elected and we come here, we are supposed to be voting for really important matters and take those hard votes. That includes tax increases and it includes tax decreases. There's currently in law a gas tax, and there are constantly proposed other taxes to make them automatic increases in law. I believe that to be unconstitutional, of course, what a surprise. But more importantly than that is it's unprincipled. And that's far more important. Because when we come to the legislature, for example, last year, there was a movement to suspend the gas tax increase that was put into law to be increased automatically. And I know the argument could be made, of course, we could just suspend the automatic increase. No, folks, if you're going to increase a tax, there should be a bill, and the bill should be introduced contemporaneously with that legislature, that 90-day legislature, and it should be passed or it should fail, depending on what the feeling is of the legislature. So this bill, members of the Ways and Means Committee, is a simple bill that would go to the voters to say that a tax cannot be increased or decreased in Maryland unless there is an affirmative vote by the legislature. It's pretty hard to believe that anyone could be against such a common sense bill. That's why we were sent here. We weren't sent here to skirt the difficult issues and give it to some sort of bureaucracy that is unelected. And I know the argument can be made too, and I saw this in here, it's kind of interesting, and that is, what about the Board of Public Works? They can increase taxes for property taxes. And I would argue that that's wrong as well, because one of the members really isn't elected by the people. That's our job. It's our job to decide what the tax rate is. And I can assure you that we would have different outcomes if this were indeed a constitutional amendment whereby we were required to increase taxes every time or decrease taxes every time. So with that, Madam Chairwoman, I would be happy to take any questions. Pretty straightforward and simple bill.
Are there any questions for Delegate Fisher?
Oh, come on.
I have a question.
Ah, good.
Is alterate in the dictionary?
Is alterate?
You
I
said-
know, I said alteration. I meant to say alteration
So
instead of
what is he
alterate.
saying?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
I know
yes,
what you
yes.
meant, but you know.
You know what? If you notice, I brought my glasses and I probably should have put them on when I had the opportunity.
I'm just
So,
teasing you, Delegate
That,
Fish.
it's well deserved, as you
I'm
know.
just teasing.
Well deserved.
Well, no questions for you. Okay, thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank
That
you.
concludes the testimony on House Bill
Thank you, Madam Chair.
730. House Bill 641, Delegate Weibel.
Thank you, Chair Atterbury. Do you mind if I bring up the panel?
Yes, please. I have Laura Bogley and
Yeah.
Danielle Pimentel.
Okay. Thank you and good afternoon. I am Delegate Weibel and pleased to present House Bill 641. The intent of House Bill 641 is the same as other tax credit programs to encourage and incentivize certain behaviors. In this case, the behavior encouraged is private donations to pregnancy centers located within the state by providing a tax credit equal to 50% of the donation made to the eligible charitable organization. Under the bill and as amended, such tax credits must be certified by the Secretary of State and are limited to $1,000 per individual and $5,000 in the case of a business. The overall statewide limit in the bill is $3 million. Pregnancy centers provide a valuable service to their constituents by providing life-affirming services to women with immediate and ongoing needs related to their pregnancy. The essential and professional care typically includes free baby items, pregnancy testing, options consultation, medical services, including ultrasounds and medical exams, education, counseling, pre- and post-pregnancy assistance. Pregnancy centers operate under a National Code of Ethics, and medical services are provided under the supervision of a licensed physician. Many centers today also offer expanded outreach programs for victims of human trafficking and drug addiction. These services are provided at no cost to the recipient. Nationwide, there are an estimated 2,700 pregnancy centers providing an estimated value of services in excess of $266 million. I would like to respond to the testimony of Pam Casemeyer. Her written testimony mistakenly states that House Bill 641, quote, incorrectly implies that donations to these entities are not already tax deductible, end of quote. That assertion is false. If you look at page 2 of the bill, donations claimed under the proposed tax credit program would actually be included as an adjustment or add back to federal AGI when calculating Maryland AGI. So the bill clearly does not make any such implication. And finally, I have requested an amendment to change the department to the Office of Secretary of State Charities and Legal Services Division, who already registers charities in the state. The bill is drafted erroneously listed the department as the Department of Health. We have requested that amendment, and it should be forthcoming. These centers offer hope to women, many times at their greatest hour of need. I would ask that you offer this same hope to the pregnancy centers, and I ask for a favorable report on House Bill 641. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. My name is Danielle Pimentel, and I serve as Policy Counsel with Americans United for Life. Today, I urge your support of HB 641 with the amendment because it ensures that more underserved women will receive quality professional care in Maryland. For the past 50 years, pregnancy resource centers have provided invaluable free resources to low-income women across the nation. The Charlotte Lozier Institute found that in 2019 alone, over 2,700 pregnancy resource centers served close to 2 million people in the United States. And as Delegate Weibel mentioned, the estimated value of those services was $266 million. There are currently around 3,000 pregnancy resource centers, so the value of that these centers can provide in their services is even higher than that amount. And this illustrates the incredible community resource these centers are to women around them. Maryland has recognized this and has around 40 centers throughout the state, which is more than the number of abortion clinics. These pregnancy centers have been faithfully serving the women of Maryland for years and offer free resources, as again Delegate Weibel has mentioned. The need for these pregnancy resource centers has risen, given that more women are rejecting abortion and choosing to continue their pregnancies, which is shown by the fact that the abortion rate is nearly half of what it was in the late 1980s after Roe v. Wade was decided. This bill acknowledges the invaluable resources and services that pregnancy centers offer to women by extending a tax credit for individuals and businesses that donate to qualifying centers. And the bill provides an opportunity for these individuals who support pregnancy resource centers to invest more in their community and put their money towards underserved women. As pregnancy resource centers receive additional financial support from their local community, they will be able to assist more pregnant women in Maryland. And this is important because, and I'll wrap up, 90% of pregnancy resource centers' funding comes from the local community. So by rewarding these taxpayers with a tax credit for their voluntary contributions to pregnancy resource centers, this bill will ensure that more women in Maryland receive free and essential professional care during their pregnancies and postpartum. For these reasons, I urge the committee to support this bill with the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Bogle.
Good afternoon, Chairman Atterbury, members of the committee. I'm Laura Bogley, Executive Director of Maryland Right to Life. On behalf of the Board of Directors, I thank Delegate Weibel for bringing this important bill and urge your favorable report. Pregnancy resource centers are model community-based nonprofit organizations that for more than 50 years have provided life-affirming services designed to empower women to choose life for their children. Today, pregnancy centers provide an expanded range of essential care encompassing support services, medical care, and resources, usually at no cost to the women, men, and youth they serve. It is important to note that in these centers, clients are served without regard to race, sex, age, income, nationality, religious affiliation, disability, or any other arbitrary circumstance. The impact of pregnancy centers is remarkable, serving millions of clients and saving countless lives. Pregnancy resource centers also save taxpayers tens of millions of dollars each year by providing for critical services not otherwise provided by the state. There are 37 pregnancy centers in Maryland that receive no public funding, but instead rely solely on private donations. HB 641 would allow limited state tax credits for cash donations to eligible centers, ensuring that they may continue to serve their communities. A recent study in the journal Contraception provides strong statistical evidence that pregnancy resource centers offer better, less expensive services than abortion facilities with lesser wait times. In fact, the authors found that over 68% of pregnancy centers offer same-day appointments as compared to just 30% of those in abortion facilities. Some of the pregnancy centers do operate under licensed medical directors and utilize licensed medical professionals to provide diagnostic ultrasounds to confirm pregnancy and testing for sexually transmitted diseases. These medical centers operate in accordance with all applicable laws and medical standards and carry sufficient medical liability coverages. Services also include diaper donations, clothing, safety, car seats, and other support services to pregnant women and families. And for these reasons, we urge your favorable report.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the committee? Delegate Feldmark.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I wanted to clarify, I believe I heard testimony that these centers operate under a licensed medical professional. Since these are pregnancy centers, would that medical professional be an obstetrician?
I'll answer that question. So, Delegate, there are both medical pregnancy centers and general pregnancy centers. The medical pregnancy centers are required by law to operate under a licensed medical director. Under Maryland state law, that may be a licensed physician or a licensed nurse practitioner.
Okay. And are medical pregnancy centers and general pregnancy centers clearly distinguishable to a person who may be seeking services there?
They absolutely are, and that primarily is done through membership association affiliations. So the medical pregnancy centers are affiliated centers. They deal with national organizations that have a very extensive guidelines and requirements for medical standards of care that they all must adhere to. So those medical centers will be listed under those affiliated national organizations as opposed to community-based and oftentimes faith-based support services for women that do not.
Okay. And these are, I just want to make sure I understand, these are the types of centers that you would be reaching or referred to if you see one of the pregnant need help kind of billboards or ads, is that correct?
Absolutely, and there's federal and state court precedent that says that those pregnancy centers are able to advertise. They cannot be prevented for advertising as long as they're not miscommunicating that they are actually performing abortion services. So many of them do give pregnancy counseling on all options, including abortion, but the difference is when they go to the abortion facilities, they are not being given informed consent about the potential risks of abortion procedures, and when they go to the pregnancy resource centers, they are provided all information so they can make an informed decision.
So when someone goes to a pregnancy center, a crisis pregnancy center, and is seeking abortion care, how do they access that care?
Well, it's the same standard that we've heard time and time again, they say is happening in the abortion facilities. They receive the full array of counseling services if they've asked for those counseling services, which would include, again, the risks of abortion, and they will be instructed at that time that abortions are not provided there, but they will be provided information about abortion. But federal and state court precedent has said these pregnancy centers are not required to actively refer women to those abortion centers. But they can easily do that through the Maryland Department of Health website that has a drop-down abortion center locator.
And the medical centers, are these, let me start over. Rephrase that. For either the medical centers or the general centers, is there a position from the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists on crisis pregnancy centers?
I'm sure that they do take a position. I know that they take a position in favor of abortion, and they actively promote abortion, but I don't advocate for ACOG policies or statements.
Thank you.
Delegate Wells.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to clarify, because you made a statement that at abortion centers or places that perform abortion, that they're not required to provide any documentation on I guess, the risk, the long-term, like there's no risk information they're required to provide. I just want to make sure that I heard you say that. So you're saying that there's no standard in the state of Maryland that requires providers to provide information about any possible risk from getting an abortion?
What I'm informing you, Delegate, is that Maryland law does not require that someone providing an abortion obtain the informed consent of a woman before conducting or performing an abortion service. Maryland Right to Life, through several pro-life legislators year over year, usually introduced the Woman's Right to Know Act, which would ensure women do get the informed consent that they deserve, but routinely this assembly rejects or votes down those bills.
Can you explain to me what you mean by informed consent specifically? Like what would qualify as informed consent?
Well, I would refer you to any statement for informed consent for a medical association like the American Association of Pro-Life Obstetricians and Gynecologists. I am not a medical physician, so I may not include everything that they would believe would be fully inclusive. But routinely, women are not informed of the risks of abortion procedures, especially chemical abortions, which are now 54% of the abortions women are receiving. Now they are allowed to get them through the mail without a physician examination. They're 4 times more dangerous than surgical abortions, and women are just left to
I just want to clarify.
Self-administer.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify, because I guess the way that you made that statement, it sounded like there's no information given at all by providers on the risk, the long-term impact, what have you. It almost sounds like there's no standard of care or what have you, and it sounds like you are insinuating that. Is that correct?
I'm not insinuating anything,
Okay.
Delegate. I'm a statement of fact that Maryland law does not require abortion providers to obtain women's informed consent, meaning they are not being required by the state of Maryland to provide a full list of what pro-life obstetricians and gynecologists would recommend women be advised.
But that does not mean that a provider does not do these things, is correct?
Well, there are several studies, several reports that have shown that women that have gone for abortion services have not received extensive counseling as to
But
the
there
risks.
could be providers that do provide it, though, even though the state does not.
I hope that there are, Delegate.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from the committee? I have a couple questions. So, and this is not HDO, I recognize that, but I don't know, I feel like we are today. So if an individual, I'm trying to understand the difference between a general pregnancy center and a medical pregnancy center. I know Delegate Feldmark asked the question, and I think I understand the difference, but when you go to either one, is an individual given their full, I guess, full information in terms of all of their options, or are they just given one option? Because you're talking a lot about doctors, which I have a hard time believing, aren't giving folks their informed consent. But if someone goes to a pregnancy center, are they being given all of their options, which would include having an abortion, or are they not?
I cannot speak to all pregnancy centers, but the pregnancy centers that we work with in the state of Maryland all follow the standards where they give women counseling on the full array of pregnancy options. And this is important that they do this. They want to do that because they want to be able to give women informed consent and advise them of the risks of abortion. So they do speak to abortion. They do speak to the fact that it is available and that is an option to them, but they provide them all of the information they need to make that decision. And they are not required by law to actively refer women to abortion clinics.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, that concludes the testimony on House Bill 641. Delegate Weibel, House Bill 647. And Paul Schwartz.
Thank you, Chairwoman Atterbury, Vice Chair Wilkins, and honorable members of the Ways and Means Committee. I'm Delegate Weibel, again pleased to present House Bill 647. A variation of House Bill 647 was introduced in the 2021 session. What the bill does is it seeks completion of the work that was started by the legislature actually in 2018 when the Maryland legislature decoupled from the federal code for personal exemptions. House Bill 647 asks that you do the same for itemized deductions as was done for personal exemptions. Decouple them from the federal tax code and allow Marylanders to itemize deductions on their state return, regardless of whether they have itemized deductions on their federal income tax return. I have placed a sunset in the bill so that its requirements are applicable only for tax years after December 31, 2022 and prior to January 1, 2026, and have placed a requirement for the Comptroller's Office to report to the legislature of the actual financial impact of the legislation on the income tax revenues of the state. As you all are aware, the 2017 Federal Tax Cuts and Jobs Act was the largest rewrite of the federal tax code since the Tax Reform Act of 1986. The federal government eliminated the personal exemption and roughly doubled the standard deduction. This action by the federal government has intentionally kept most taxpayers from itemizing deductions on their federal return. House Bill 647 would still use the federal itemized deductions as the starting point for Maryland. Using this approach, Maryland tax revenues for those itemizing deductions would be higher than pre-TCJA Tax Cuts and Jobs Acts because of the many base broadening provisions in the federal act. These provisions include a lower cap on the mortgage interest deduction, other changes including interest deductibility, caps on state and local tax deductions, and elimination of the itemized deductions subject to the 2% AGI limitation. There is a competitive nature to state taxation of its residents, and both businesses and individuals choose where to do business or reside based upon this competitiveness. Doing nothing negatively impacts our ratings and rankings when compared to other states. For instance, in nearby Virginia, beginning in 2022, that state's standard deduction is $8,000 for single filers and $16,000 for married filing joint filers. Maryland's standard deduction remains at a maximum of $2,400 for single filers and $4,850 for joint filers. Meaningfully increasing the standard deduction is another way to obtain the same result as decoupling the itemized deductions. However, House Bill 647 does not address the standard deduction. I thank you, and I ask for a favorable report on House Bill 647.
Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members. My name is Paul Schwartz, and I represent more than NARF. I represent taxpayers across this state. There are two reasons, and only two reasons, why this bill never gets out of committee. The first reason is the cost as calculated in the fiscal note. The second reason are the resources that may be needed by the Comptroller's Office to implement it. Please let me explain why neither of those reasons are valid. I'm going to read to you what Robert Rearman, who was the original author of the fiscal note, way back when the Trump tax plan was implemented, his response to me when I raised this issue. And I quote, "Initial analysis of tax year 2017 and 2018 data show that taxpayers claiming state itemized deductions decreased by $670,900, a reduction of slightly less than one-half, with a similar increase in taxpayers claiming the state standard deduction, $687,600. This language is basically repeated in the fiscal note that we got last night. What they're saying is that if we decouple the federal from the state tax returns, that all those taxpayers who jumped from itemizing their deductions and jumped to taking the standard because there's the newly increased standard at the federal level will now, with decoupling, all jump back to taking the itemizing. The problem with that logic is that none of those middle-class tax deductions that were eliminated in the Trump tax plan have been added back. So the chance of all of them reverting back to itemizing is absurd. The only ones who actually are going to get penalized are those who continue to take itemized deductions from 2017 on and cannot avail themselves of the increased federal tax deduction that was raised. And that only hurts those people, but it doesn't hurt the budget, the Treasury of Maryland, because it only impacts at the federal level. And I'll just quickly say the second reason is about the cost to the Comptroller's Office. I spoke in extensive detail with Brooke Lehrman, and she gets it, unlike her predecessor. And she said, these are her words, that a lack of resources is not going to be an excuse for not doing the work that needs to be done by the Comptroller's Office.
Thank you. Thank you. Are there any questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much. That concludes the testimony on House Bill 647. Delegate Chi, House Bill 622. And do you have anyone you'd like to bring up? There are folks signed up to testify.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and distinguished colleagues of the Ways and Means Committee. I'm thrilled to be back today. I'm Delegate Lily Chi, here to present HB 622. Today is Manufacturing Day in Maryland, and I hope this is not only a timely discussion about reviving Maryland's manufacturing leadership, but also I hope, more importantly, all of you have stopped by the Governor Carver's house and had your head scanned so you can have a 3D printed bust mailed to you afterwards. That was a lot of fun. I want to start today's presentation by asking you a question that you should all be able to relate to, which is, have you wondered why one of the two elevators that go to the garage in this building still has not been fixed, now that we are almost halfway through the legislative session? Have you wondered about that? Okay, I pinned down Morgan Streeter, poor guy, several times, and finally he admitted that's because the big wheel on top of the elevator is German-made, and we just don't have the parts. So all we can do is wait. That's it. And the good news, bad news is you have to wait until this summer. So tough luck. This brings me to the point, which is it's a perfect example of our reliance on foreign supply chains. And of course, the pandemic has made it abundantly clear that we must reverse the decades-long trend of offshoring and make more things in America again. From medical supplies, such as the ventilators and PPE during the pandemic, to computer chips that are now virtually in everything we use. Because beefing up domestic production is not just an economic imperative, but it is also increasingly a national security imperative as well. So HB 622 is an answer to that call. It's a critical step towards reclaiming Maryland's national leadership in manufacturing. Specifically, this bill establishes the Industry 4.0 matching grant program to help small and medium-sized entrepreneurs or manufacturers, of course they are also entrepreneurs, adopt new technologies to stay competitive. As this committee recalls, 2 years ago, the legislature passed a bill to establish a work group called Transforming Manufacturing in the Digital Economy, or Make It in Maryland. I was honored to chair that work group made of industry, higher education, labor, and government representatives. And some of the industry representatives are here today for this particular bill, and I sincerely thank all of them for their tremendous hard work and contributions. For well over a year, we explored the myriad of challenges facing Maryland manufacturers, and we conducted extensive research, including other states, competing states, good practices and policies, and made a set of recommendations in this report that you should all have a copy of in your packet to the governor and the legislature. One of the things we learned from this whole process was that while Maryland has a proud history in manufacturing, and our manufacturing jobs pay well above the state's average wage, we are only at half of the national average in our density of manufacturing jobs. So in other words, we have tremendous room for growth. But a critical barrier for that growth is the small medium businesses, is the high cost of technological investments in both hardware and software to stay competitive. So this program we are proposing, the Industry 4.0 Matching Grant Program and the fund, is designed to address that barrier, to de-risk the adoption of technologies for these small and medium businesses and manufacturers. It is, of course, modeled after other states' good practices, including states like Connecticut, Indiana, Iowa, and Massachusetts. So today, on Maryland Manufacturing Day, we have a humble ask, which is $10 million a year for the next 5 years. I know it's a bold program with a bold ask, but this is what's needed to put our state on the map as a serious leader, national and global leader for high-tech manufacturing, as we should. So we can have more locally grown global brands, such as McCormick, such as Under Armour. So in case you wonder how this program would work, I'm very pleased to report that the Department of Commerce already has this model program in place. It's a pilot program with only $1 million in place from last fiscal year. But with only $1 million, 57 companies jumped on that, okay? And 23 of them actually were awarded grants. That's 23 Maryland local manufacturers that have benefited from this program. We're building on that. So if we can make that tenfold, the multiplying impact will be incalculable to our state's economy and our community's pride. And finally, I just want to say there has never been a better time to grow Maryland manufacturing. With the federal government's strong focus on making in Maryland, in America, and with Maryland's high concentration of STEP talent and R&D assets, we can definitely work to usher in a new era of manufacturing renaissance in Maryland. So with that, thank you very much. I would like to turn it over to my panel of experts and supporters. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Antoine Hutchinson. I'm owner of FabPro Technologies, a precision metal manufacturer in Maryland. I actually, last year, I was one of the 23 companies that received the grant for the $50,000. I received a grant for $50,000 to buy a piece of equipment that cost roughly $200,000. Well, the piece of equipment was $180,000, but between electrical and rigging and delivery was $200,000, which is quite a bit. But with that piece of equipment that we've now received, I've now added already 3 jobs, and I've also locked down a cybersecurity company which was previously getting their parts made in Taiwan. They've now reshored those parts to Maryland, and we're doing roughly $500,000. Roughly $500,000 in sales, with just that one cybersecurity company, and that press brake that we got the grant for was integral in purchasing that piece of equipment. Because as you know, for a company my size, $200,000 is quite a bit to come up with. And then just last year, we purchased a $400,000 piece of equipment, a laser to do work for a local government, multi-billion-dollar government defense contractor. When they've now awarded us over $1 million in contracts, and I've actually added 10 new employees in this sector. The thing about technology and the investment in technology, why it's important for Maryland is because technology is the ultimate equalizer. My company employs, my entire management staff are women, and half of whom are women of color. My lead engineer is a woman of color. With this new technology, the new technology comes with training. This training makes it a level playing field, which means that like someone with the willingness to learn can do such. And that's and also like my company also employs 3 formerly incarcerated. One of the formerly incarcerated is actually like training right now on some of the advanced technology that we bought last year, and I'm optimistic that he'll be able to run it. My company pays like really high wages by comparison to industry standards. Every single one of my employees would be considered like in the upper end as far as income. Anyway, that's it. Any questions?
Thank you. Hi, I'm Mike Galeazzo, the president of the Regional Manufacturing Institute of Maryland, and which is a stakeholder organization. Many of you know me. We've been down here for like 34 years talking about manufacturing. But I have to first say, Delegate Chi, thank you for supporting this bill, and thank you for that amazing testimony about the importance of manufacturing. I want to talk at a slightly different level. You know, this House Bill 622 is a top recommendation of the work group that I served on and many of the other people that will be testifying today. And what it is about, it's about the reality of the day, the reality that advanced technologies are fundamentally changing the way in which we live, the way in which we work, and the way in which we shop. And many of you know this, okay? You know this because you own smartphones, you own a Tesla, or maybe you own a new kitchen appliance, or you use Google, or you use artificial intelligence. These are part of that menu of those advanced technologies that are ever changing our world of work and of living. This hearing, amazingly, is also an example of that technology, and that it allows people to be anywhere on Earth and testify virtually. I mean, who would have thought of that 10 years ago? And that's part of the point behind this message today. Delegate Chi chaired that legislative work group for over 2 years, and it was about the future of Maryland manufacturing. And this bill represents a passport to that future. It prepares Maryland today to be the distinguished global leaders for decades to come. You know, I've learned manufacturing is an instrument of social change. Our goal is no different than your goal as elected officials. We help people to enjoy a better living, and that's what it's all about. So I encourage you to support HB 222, and I want to thank you for your time.
I'm an attorney, manufacturer, and entrepreneur. I own a baked goods company that manufactures for Starbucks, Wegmans, Safeway, QVC, and we often sell over 90,000 products in an hour when we appear on television. We are a manufacturer of baked goods. Maryland must choose whether manufacturing is important enough to support it fiscally. Will it choose to lag behind other states that have accepted the realities that manufacturing in this country is not only transformative, but necessary to compete in the global market? Or will Maryland lie dormant and forego an opportunity to propel the manufacturing industry forward? I tend to think the former. Our manufacturers support each other, and each year we choose to keep our business in Maryland despite other states offering incentives for us to leave. We are home to some of the top small, medium, and large manufacturers. We are diverse. We create jobs, have a tax base that is undeniable, and collectively we do good in the community. What we have here in this great state are current and emerging manufacturers, colleges, high schools, nonprofits, associations, government agencies, legislators, and the business community that has formed alliances to strengthen our desire to compete in the manufacturing sector, not with each other, but against other countries that are producing what we can produce here on our own shores. Manufacturing is the intersection of materials, ideas, automation, products, technology, and software, a far cry from where Maryland manufacturing was in the 50s. America's dependence on other nations to manufacture is not only dangerous, but volatile. Imagine a world where manufacturers in states like Maryland are putting itself in a position to be less dependent on foreign entities. We are in the middle of a wake-up call, and you must answer the phone. And on the other line is the manufacturing industry sending a warning and advising that we need fiscal support to establish our companies as Industry 4.0 ready. So will you answer the call or put us on hold? I urge you to support.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, my name is Charles Wheatley, and I ask you to note a personal privilege to tell you how much I appreciate being here today. I haven't been back to Annapolis to testify for over 20 years, but in 1963, I was a member of this committee, and to say, and I got to challenge you and to tell you that the settings have changed. We used to meet in the State House, and then we moved down the hall, and I was a legislative representative for 12 years for the Maryland State Teachers Association and became the executive secretary. I've watched the work this committee has done over the years, and happy to say that Maryland education, I travel and work in all 50 states, has done well in keeping up the reputation of a good state education program. So I want to congratulate you for that. This is not the bill, but the bill I'm here for, that has just been referred to, was contacted to me by my good friend Mike Galeazzo. Mike and I, 32 years ago, got together and tried to get liftoff for the Regional Manufacturing Institute. Obviously, Mike has done a good job. I worked with him 2 years, but he's been doing it 32 years. So I tell you this because I have grave concerns. I believe I'm the only one here who remembers the days before World War II. I'm 90 years old. I remember those days because things were bad. My father was a machinist and a tool and die maker. I knew what a lathe was at age 3. I have been working with manufacturing ever since. My 3 children are engaged in various types of manufacturing. I've worked in many countries around the world and all 50 states in manufacturing things. But I got to tell you, I'm very worried today. I'm beginning to see the deja vu all over again, as my old colleague used to quote. And I see now that we have bad economy coming up, predicted, and we have a bad competitive economic structure that's taking away the jobs of my fellow friends in Baltimore City, where I grew up and where my father made a living during the Depression, because the nature of manufacturing is changing at a rapid pace unheard of in the past. I got Johns Hopkins their first Da Vinci robot 30 years ago. They let me come in and watch the surgery. I'm a lawyer, not a doctor. It doesn't mean you have to be a doctor to work with medicine. I guess you understand that. I also got them their first molecular microscopes, 2 of them free from Carl Zeiss. They still use it for their cancer. I started the first commercial satellite launching at Cape Canaveral. Rockets, Elon Musk making money in space. Cells, the new manufactured product, cells, mitochondria, things that we never thought of in the medical. And I am working with people who are making water out of the air. The world is changing. If we don't change, we will become part of the nation that are ashes on the pile of history. I hope you will all support this bill, and I can tell you that my wife and I have started a park called the Veterans Big Stem Park on our farm, 20 acres, a C3, that we're going to donate money to this thing because I encourage you to make the state a partner. This is not a gift, a partner with the manufacturers of Maryland who put up their money, and I want the charitable organizations to become a part of that also. So I urge you to give this great consideration because the clock is ticking. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, and we appreciate you. Mr. Lemoyne-Stovall, do you want to come up and testify?
I'm sorry, you have to apologize. I have apologize. I have to apologize. I was in the first missile class. I have a little military hearing, so I have to listen very carefully.
I just wanted to say thank you so much for coming to testify. I think we are all sitting here hoping and praying that when we reach 90, we are walking around and still active and engaged as you are, especially since you once sat in these seats, and so you know what we go through, so we appreciate you, sir. So thank you very much for being here
Well,
today.
thank you, and I appreciate it. I'm writing a book says life begins at 90, or the first 100 years are the hardest. My kids all, who are very brilliant people, say, why do you say that? Well, I had to think fast. So I said, I say that because every person I know who is 100 or more says after that, it's all downhill. And if it's downhill, it's easier than uphill.
Well, thank you.
I appreciate your time. You have my congratulations for winning your elections. I got elected to 4 different offices in Baltimore against the biggest machine in 10 years and never ran for the same office twice and always got more votes and retired without the benefit of voters or courts. So I urge you to accept the challenge and do good for the people of Maryland.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Now, we got some other people to testify. I don't know how you're going to follow that.
I will say thank you for allowing me to follow that. Appreciate you. Exactly, thank you. Once again, Troy Lamel Stovall, the CEO of TEDCO. Look, thank you, Delegate Chief, for your leadership and your continued support of TEDCO and the ecosystem. This very much follows my earlier testimony. This is another tool. I used that word earlier. This is a tool that's needed in order to accelerate. And I want to emphasize something from the report. The study that Delegate Atterbury mentioned that we led, one of the key elements, they said in order to change that trajectory of 1.6% job growth to 4%, which is again just the average, that the key element of that is going to be manufacturing jobs. And manufacturing jobs that do not require a college degree but are extremely well-paying jobs. And by the way, manufacturing that can occur throughout the state is not limited to certain parts of the state. So we couldn't be more supportive of this. Again, this is a tool that we believe is very much part of what we just talked about with our Ecotech Growth Fund, and we've asked for a favorable report on House Bill 622.
Hi, my name is Ken Sanchez, and I'm the president and CEO of a company called Chesapeake Specialty Products in Sparrows Point, Maryland. I am a manufacturer, and we are an exporter, and I want to bring that up because I think it's very important when you think about what we do in Maryland and the manufacturing and the little bit of manufacturing that's here. There's not a lot of stuff that we do in Maryland that actually leaves the state. We do a lot of services here in Maryland. So I think it's important for this bill because it's going to help the few manufacturers that we have and also to help bring manufacturers into Maryland to show the support for manufacturing. Just to give you an idea, we actually, and I say we're an exporter, believe it or not, we're actually one of the larger exporters in Maryland. We have a train facility. We used to be part of Bethlehem Steel. We bring in over 200 rail cars each year, which obviously helps the railroads. There's jobs associated with that. We send out hundreds of containers every year, which obviously there's jobs at the ports that are supported with that. And we also sell to probably over 25 countries in the world right now. Believe it or not, we are selling to China. We are selling to Japan. The place that we think about that are actually dumping product into our area, we are actually selling product into their areas, and the money's coming back here into Maryland. So, and the taxes and the jobs that we're creating are being made by us as a manufacturer. One of the things I really like about this bill is because being a manufacturer in Maryland is very difficult. And quite frankly, there's not a lot of support. This bill would be a really big boost to manufacturers. So many states within the United States are providing, I think April talked about this, incredible incentives to get companies to move out of the state of Maryland, okay? We don't need that. We just need help bringing the technology in so we can be competitive with them. We need to be able to compete with the other countries, the manufacturers in Germany, in China, in Japan. We can do that with this bill. It's going to help the small and medium-sized businesses to be able to grow our business, use the technology, and these are very expensive and risky technologies. So if we can use this fund to help...
Sir, can you wrap up, please?
Sure. If we can use this fund to help the small and medium-sized businesses, They'll grow, create more jobs, and create the tax benefits for the state. Thank you.
Thank you. Sir?
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, and to the entire committee. Thank you for having me here today, and more importantly, for considering this important piece of legislation that we know will positively impact the manufacturing community. My name is Michael Kelleher. I'm the Executive Director of the Maryland Manufacturing Extension Partnership, Maryland MEP. We are a true example of a public-private partnership that works to grow manufacturing throughout the state of Maryland, working with our federal partners, our state partners, and most importantly, the industry partners. In my role as the director of the Maryland MEP, I'm fortunate to call upon the nearly 4,000 manufacturers that we have across the state, including an elevator manufacturer, Lily, so we can get that taken care of. In doing so, more than 85% of these manufacturers are small or very small businesses. And when we talk to them, very consistently, these manufacturers share that one of their greatest challenges is with adopting and implementing new technologies. This Industry 4.0 bill will help solve those concerns because it will help de-risk and reduce the cost for those enterprises to implement these technologies into their operations. I had the fortune of traveling to Germany just a few weeks ago on a trade mission to benchmark some of the German companies and their use of technologies, companies like Siemens and Bosch and BMW, and I can tell you they are way ahead of where we are in Maryland, but there's no reason that our companies can't get there. House Bill 622 will serve as that critical economic driver for our manufacturers. It'll make capital available to them through this cost sharing, right? Through this matching grant program that will enable the small and the very small businesses that don't otherwise have access to capital to be able to afford some of these technologies and to be able to understand how they can impact their operations and make them more competitive at the state level, domestically, and globally with their peers. The program itself that the committee put together was modeled after what's already in place in some of our neighboring states. Our manufacturers are at a disadvantage when we look at our neighbors to the north and to the south. And so for those reasons, I ask that the committee take a favorable consideration of House Bill 622. We know that it will be a key economic driver for Maryland moving into the future.
Thank you. Questions? Delegate Plakovich-Carr?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And actually, this question might be best for the bill sponsor. She doesn't mind coming back up. Thank you for this legislation. I am supportive of the intentions here, especially to help smaller sized companies. My question is, in the bill, it says SME manufacturer means a small or medium-sized enterprise manufacturer, but I don't see anywhere else in the bill where it actually defines what small or medium-sized is. Can you elaborate on that?
Sure. We actually debated and discussed amongst ourselves how to define it. And I think it's better to leave it undefined because we want to give the administrators more wiggle room to see how they can best apply the funds as they are already. So according to the federal standard, it could be under 500 people, but I think some flexibility would be good. And of course, vast majority of our businesses in Maryland are way below that threshold. Many of them are, if you have 50 people employee in Maryland, that's a medium-sized company, So, and that's basically what we're talking about. Very few actually could, be like a 500 people company. Those are not the ones that need our help for the most part, So if that helps answer your question, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I may circle back with you as we, as some of the other bills we've had that have come through the committee, we've tried to, tailor or more specifically define that.
Yeah,
so thank you.
Absolutely.
I'd like to just add, that will cover every minority and women-owned manufacturing company in Maryland. So I just want to make sure we make that point.
Delegate Barnes, do you have a question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Delegate Chi, I think all of us can appreciate this bill and with the understanding of the need of manufacturing here in the state of Maryland. But as I go through this, and in this committee, we have to make tough decisions. And part of the tough decisions is looking at what is presented before us, and that's the fiscal note. Can you explain the fiscal note of this and for me to then digest that to see if there's a way to make this happen with a smaller dollar amount, but more importantly, if you can explain to us what the Department of Commerce is doing now with the pilot program that they have, that you indicated that there was $1 million in that fund, and the number of businesses that it already helped. And is that money that's in there now, is that reoccurring, or was that a one-time allotment of funds?
Well, as far as I understand, that's just a pilot program for that year. And I believe they started with 25% match. So even though in our bill, we kind of mentioned some examples, like if you are a bigger company, you pitching more percentage than if you are a much smaller company in terms of match. Again, we are not really wedded to that. We would like to let the administrator of the program figure out what is the best matching scheme and develop some regs around that. Because in real life, it's very hard to predict what is a good one-size-fits-all formula, so to speak. About your first question about the funding requirement, that is our ask, and I understand all of us have to make tough budget choices. But I think the risk of doing nothing is too great. So with that in mind, I appreciate Commerce Department's support and the administration's spirit of support. And however much is funded is going to be a boost to Maryland manufacturings, whether it's 10 million or another amount. So I think the Commerce Department letter made it clear that they support this bill, but they would rather that is not a mandated amount of funding, which is fine with us.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any further questions from the committee? Okay, seeing none, thank you. That concludes the testimony on House Bill 622. House Bill 866, Delegate Ivey. And you have Ryan Washington in person I have listed, and one person virtual.
Yes. Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the committee, always a pleasure to be back here in Ways and Means. You know, I always come with small, simple bills, and today is no different. Today, we're here presenting House Bill 866, and what it would do would just simply exempt sales tax on utilities for residential properties. That's already something that we do. And this bill would add apartments and cooperative communities to the state's existing definition and the exemption. This is an important opportunity for us. We know that inflation has been taking a toll on families. We know that people are looking for relief in whatever format they can find it. This is one arrow in the quiver, one tool in the toolbox for us to deliver that much needed relief. I'd like to speak to the fiscal note because I know the good gentleman from Prince George's will probably bring it up. Look, residential homes are already exempt. They don't pay sales tax on utilities. And so why are we making apartment residents pay this sales tax when single-family homeowners don't have to do so? They already don't have the added benefit of owning the home that they live in. And so this is one thing that we can do to help relieve some of the burden that they already are enduring. So I have a good friend of mine here to also support the bill, and I have someone else as well in the virtual waiting room. And I'm, of course, here for any questions. I'm asking for a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Ryan Washington. This is my first time in Ways and Means. I represent the Apartment Office Building Association in Metropolitan Washington, also known as AOBA. We represent apartment owners, commercial and real estate across Prince George's and Montgomery counties. Roughly about 133 rental units in both jurisdictions. I like just to give a special appreciation for Delegate Ivey for sponsoring this important legislation that will help out our members and, most importantly, renters. Just as the good delegate said, this bill clarifies that apartments are included in the exemption for sales tax, specifically master meter apartments. So this would be more in line with Class B and C properties, which are older and are catered to the workforce population. So many of the residents are low and moderate income. And in the climate that we're in with inflation and the cost of utilities going up, with WSSE having a 6.5% increase in rate increases for the fiscal year 2023, and the PSC already authorized for a $52 million increase. This will help out a lot of residents. It will offset costs for residents that are usually passed down, state mandates for benchmarking requirements, which is, slated to be in the billions just to retrofit existing gas with a full electric grid. These are costs that are passed down to tenant, and it's in the form of rent increases. This bill is one of the tools that will help preserve housing affordability and decrease costs for renters. And I also like to highlight in the fiscal note that it provides a very high number for reduction in tax revenue. I think it provides a more broad perspective. It doesn't address master meter apartments, which is a very small population percentage throughout the state, and that figure is nowhere near the amount that's stated in the fiscal note.
Thank you. We will bring up the one virtual person, Mr. Landsman, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to members of the committee. It's my pleasure to be here today. My name is Adam Landsman. I am the president of Pulse IQ. We are a maker of technology software and hardware, and we manufacture energy efficiency products for multifamily properties here in Montgomery County, Maryland. In 1999, the state of Maryland approved a sales tax exemption that was predominantly geared for residential users of utilities. Unfortunately, the trigger language in the law was residential or domestic rate classes as defined by the Public Service Commission. And I think this is a poorly worded trigger language reflecting a lack of understanding of how rate classes are structured with the PSC, as well as how buildings are actually operated. Condominium associations recognized the problem and passed a clarification exempting them from the law, from sales tax in 2001. But apartments just never got together to do this. Utility sales tax exemption currently applies, as a previous witness has said, to residents of single family homes. It applies to residents of condominiums, both for the common areas as well as for the units. And it does apply currently to apartments where the apartment residents are individually metered with their own electric or gas meters. The only exemption here, the people that are paying sales tax, are the folks in master meter buildings. These are buildings that are, again, typically older and have lower and middle income residents. As a matter of equity, the law should not create a burden of taxation on the residents in this state who are least able to to take on the burden of higher energy costs. And as a matter of housing affordability at a time, as again, the other witnesses spoke about, when utility costs are rising, where rents are rising, and we are putting additional requirements on buildings to improve their energy performance, it doesn't make sense to continue to target one small subset of homeowners or residents, pardon me, in the state of Maryland for tax. And again, I want to add a note on the fiscal note. We're talking about something that might be $50 to $60 per apartment per month in a truly master meter building. So I don't think there are probably more than 50,000 units of that nature in the state. I think the fiscal
I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. Great.
Are there any questions? Madam Vice Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Delegate, for bringing this bill, and to Mr. Washington, who did a great job of communicating with me and others about the bill and the need for it in advance. I do have one question. I want to understand, when we talk about this bill being one that's helpful to renters, is this something where we will see that cost savings directly in their bills, or is this a bill where we are hoping for a trickle-down effect from the landlord? I just want to make that distinction.
No, and I appreciate the question, and I think he's going to respond to it as well. The bill is now in your purview, and if there's anything that can be done to strengthen it, I certainly would be supportive of that. But the intent, of course, is to ensure that the residents, the renters, are having less required of them on a monthly basis.
And just to add on with master meter, it provides wholesale rates to the property manager, the property owner, and they receive a single electric bill for the entire building, and they assess that. And a lot of times, it's included in the rent. So any of those savings costs would essentially, decrease the rent, and because a lot of times when they are financing rent increases, utility costs are associated, especially with master meter apartments. So those are some things that will offset that cost and savings for the housing provider, but it'll also pass on and provide it less burdensome for the renters as well.
Okay, so in terms of the master meter, because the landlord or property management company is paying less, we are hoping and assuming that the renter will see that cost savings. You know, that it doesn't always trickle down in that way is what we know from housing and renting and things like that. So I was just clarifying that this is something that the landlord, savings that the landlord would receive, and we are hoping that the tenant would see that cost savings.
Yes. I mean, they would see it in a decrease in their rent because that's factored into their rent right now, utilities. So essentially, yes.
Delegate Feldmar.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Madam Vice Chair, because my questions are very much aligned. I guess more specifically, if this bill were to go into effect, are you suggesting that master metered landlords would decrease the rent for their tenants?
Well, sorry. What I'm saying is what this bill will do is offset that cost. So essentially that will decrease costs for rent. Utility increases are passed on to tenants. So yes, this will be something that tenants will have offset and be unburdened with is additional increases in their rent due to utilities increasing.
Okay, if that's passed on. And so can you help me understand, I know in my district, we're seeing exorbitant rent increases. And my understanding of that is that they are not necessarily exclusively tied to the cost of managing a building, but more so to what the market will yield, right? And so I'm wondering if that's the environment that we're operating in, what would cause us to believe that any of this would be passed on to tenants as opposed to simply being a little bit more in the profit margins for a landlord? If costs are based on what you can get out of the market and not on the actual expenses for the building management.
No, and good question.
Ryan, do you mind if I jump in?
Go ahead.
Apologies. Thank you. Most buildings that are master metered have what's called a RUBS system, which is a ratio utility billing system. So what the landlord does is they tally up all of their gas and electric and water bills, and they divide it out amongst their tenants on a per square foot basis. So in most of these buildings, the tenants are directly paying these as a tack on charge to their rent. So if the total amount that the landlord sees for the master meter bill decreases, the amount of the utility subcharge that the tenants pay decreases proportional to the size of their unit. So it is a direct, in those cases, which is the majority of how these buildings operate, it would be a direct reduction in their costs.
So if you have RUBS billing, but I thought I understood earlier that there was testimony that many of these older buildings, it's simply incorporated into the rent as opposed to being a separate charge. Is that?
Some of master meter apartments.
Okay.
Others have RUBS where they're paying it, and other apartment communities, the tenant pays it directly. And those are condominiums and single family and that such.
Okay. Well, I appreciate the intent, Delegate. I'm concerned about the actual impact and if we'll see that intent, but I appreciate the bill.
I appreciate the questions, and I look forward to strengthening this legislation as well.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Delegate Miracle North.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Delegate Ivey and Mr. Washington, and the gentleman online for your testimony. I won't beat a dead horse, so I'm going to ask another question on that. Has this been done in other jurisdictions, this particular benefit to the landlord tenants? Has it?
Sorry. DC actually passed back in 2009 a very broad, but it included apartment communities in the definition in their statute as well.
And my second question is, I did hear, I think this was from the gentleman on virtual, that it was in 1999, there was exemption regarding residential and domestic properties as defined by the Public Service Commission. But he says the departments never got together to get this done. Why is that not still an option as opposed to this particular legislation?
And Adam, do you want to speak more to that?
Sure. So the original exemption for utilities on sales tax for residential properties was introduced in 1999, and then condominiums had a clarification made in that same statute. It's Tax General Section 11-207, and they added a clause that said a sale of electricity, steam, artificial or natural gas for use in residential condominiums. So they saw the problem for them and they crafted an exemption for them. What we're proposing is simply after the word residential condominiums, add cooperatives and apartment buildings, as they're the only people that in the state of Maryland that are left out of that exemption.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you. That concludes the testimony on House Bill 866.
Thank you very much. Y'all have a great one.
Delegate Hartman, House Bill 741, and Mary Kane.
I would have loved to have been able to answer some of those questions on those landlord expenses, but we'll skip that. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, and members of the Ways and Means Committee. For the record, I'm Delegate Wayne Hartman with House Bill 741 regarding corporate income tax and rate reduction. Probably thinking, oh boy, another business asking for something more. And what this bill really asks for is to allow Maryland to be competitive. It's a bill that would take the corporate tax rate from the current rate of 8.25% and it reduces 0.5% a year to 6.25%. So, you know, as any business owner can attest, and which we just heard from, you know, several business owners, Maryland is not known as a business-friendly state. In fact, our national rankings are very dismal. Nationally, Maryland ranks 44th out of 50 states in terms of the cost of doing business. We rank 44th in the cost of living generally. We rank 29th in business friendliness, and our economy ranks 31st. Maryland needs to be competitive regionally to attract business to our state, and not only attract new businesses, but to make the businesses that call Maryland home more successful and strengthen their ability to continue. Nearly a decade ago, the General Assembly created the Maryland Economic Development and Business Climate Commission. Some of you may know that as the Augustine Commission. They were tasked with examining Maryland's economic development structure and incentive programs and making recommendations to keep our state economically competitive. The commission reported their findings in 2016. One of their chief recommendations was to reduce Maryland's income tax. Since that report was given, there has been a reduction of 0% in the corporate tax rate. Maryland has one of the highest corporate tax rates in the region, higher than both Virginia at 6% and West Virginia at 6.5%, and will soon be higher than Pennsylvania. And I say soon be higher because Pennsylvania has taken an aggressive step to reduce their corporate tax rate from 8.99% to 4.99%. So they are reducing their corporate tax rate 0.5% a year. So by 2031, they will be 4.99%. The timing of this hearing is perfect with just having heard from so many business owners in Maryland. They talked about the challenges of investing in new equipment, the different challenges of, you know, $50,000 is a big deal. If we could take this money and allow those business owners to reinvest it, that would make us more competitive. And you know, we heard so many people talk about the fiscal note, And I too must say this fiscal note is very biased. This fiscal note looks at the reduction in corporate taxes that the state will collect. But it doesn't talk about what the gentlemen and business owners before us were talking about. Growing their business, hiring more employees. We hire employees, they pay income tax. Those employees are making purchases, creating more sales tax. There's just so much that feeds off of it. These new businesses would be utilizing our attorneys, like our good friend Delegate Buckle there. So this is how our economy grows. So I have to say this fiscal note is very biased, very one-sided, and it only looks at the reduction. But take that fiscal note and know how much money our businesses that are in Maryland right now will have so that they could do the growth and talk about the changes in technology that we just heard about. So with that, I'll say, if we pass this bill, Maryland will be economically competitive. Our state also needs protection against the gathering clouds of an economic storm. We all hear about the concern of the downturn in the economy. This will help Maryland in so many ways, and I ask for a favorable report on House Bill 741.
Okay. Good afternoon, Chairwoman Atterbury and members of the committee. My name is Mary Kane, and I am the President and CEO of the Maryland Chamber of Commerce. And thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak on behalf of HB 741. We are a statewide coalition of more than 6,400 members and federated partners, and our mission is to advance inclusive partnerships for a Maryland where all businesses and their communities thrive. And House Bill 741 would reduce this corporate income tax. And it is critical it's critical legislation, and it would put the state in a far greater footing in terms of business climate and national economic competitiveness. And it is well documented, as we heard about the Augustine Commission. But I have to say, just listening to the folks talking and Chair Atterbury's, your support of the TEDCO bill, if we don't have the businesses here to employ these folks that are taking advantage of this, or even the research and development that happens and in our universities, they'll take it elsewhere, okay? They will build businesses elsewhere. We were talking about Virginia coming down. Actually, it's gonna come down to 5%. They are looking at doing that now. It is, and Pennsylvania, 4.99. Ours is 8.25. You look at that, that is the very first thing. Granted, there are many things that corporations look at when they want to do business in a state, but the very first thing they look at is that corporate income tax. And we get knocked out of the picture every single time. We're not even attempting to bring this down. So I would love to have your support for HB 741 and help to make Maryland competitive. One more thing, got 7 seconds. I was on the governor's task force for the transition team for competitiveness, growing Maryland's competitiveness. And this is one of the big things we talked about. We have to grow business in Maryland, and we have to keep our entrepreneurs here in Maryland. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much. That concludes the testimony on House Bill 741.
Thank you.
Delegate Buckle, House Bill 768. We're going to see if you can fare better here than in judiciary.
I think it went okay. It's there's probably not a need, just tip for everyone, probably not a need to ask 30 questions on every bill that's not going to pass. Just going to throw that out there for you, just, something to think about. Something to think about. Maybe we don't need 30 questions if the bill's not going to pass. Thank you very much. This is 768, correct, Madam Chair? I have 3 in a row. I want to make sure I have them in a row. House Bill 768 is, on a serious note, it's basically an administrative bill. As I've expressed to many of you, particularly, obviously, the people who were here the last year or two, the Western Maryland delegation is extremely, extremely thankful and grateful to the members of this assembly that after several years of discussions about how to help us grow through economic development and needs that we have particularly that are different than the rest of the state, that the legislature chose to invest significant funds, tens of millions of dollars in funds over a lengthy period of time in a Western Maryland Economic Future Investment Board that we named the fund after my former senator, retiring senator last year, George Edwards. The fund has begun to consider dispersing some of the monies, and we have great hopes that it will help us transform our economy so that we can be more like the I-95 corridor with respect to some economic industries. And you'll hear probably all three of my bills today will address those issues in general. This bill does something to basically change the format of the oversight boards that administer the fund. I'll be bluntly honest with you. I don't know how Senator Edwards, former Senator Edwards, would testify. I was so busy for a couple of years trying to convince all of you, and maybe, you know, the Speaker's office, people like that, trying to convince all of you as to the validity and the importance of the fund and define the financing for the fund. I didn't spend a lot of time really thinking about how the board would operate. What we have found, and this is Senator Quarterman and I, Senator Quarterman has the bill on the Senate side, we believe that we probably need to clean up some of the aspects of the board, and including the bill most significantly allows for there to be an executive director. This is $50 million of funds over 5 years that will be spent. There is no self-dedicated staff. There's an individual from the Department of Commerce who sort of staffs it a little bit. There's individuals from Tri-County Council. No one is really directly responsible on a day-to-day basis for the fund, and we believe that this bill, I will say that there's, I would say, an extensive amendment. It doesn't really change the meat and potatoes of the bill. It simply changes some of the language because I would say blame the senator, but in this case it's my fault. I sort of let Senator Quarterman out on his own without giving him the participation he needed. And we chose these very unfortunate phrases, the voting board and the vetting board, which kind of sound alike and are extremely confusing and were confusing to the bill drafters, I think. In some place they had vetting, we meant voting and in the bill, but the structure is going to stay the same. It is an honest attempt to try to make the board operate more efficiently and be more accountable to the General Assembly. At the end of the day, you gave us the ability to have these funds. We're accountable and responsible to all of you to use them prudently, and we're hoping and praying that they are meritorious, that we can come back in a few years and say we're seeing real economic growth and development from the use of these state monies, and we're turning the corner in the 3 western counties. And because of that, we want to make this board more responsive, more transparent, and hopefully in a way that comports more with how we do other things. There aren't very many boards, to my knowledge, for example, in Maryland, that give $50 million responsibilities, and we have a board that says, well, you got to have someone from MML, and you got to have someone from the chamber, and the board was kind of set up more like a task force. And I think now that we understand how it's operating, we probably want to make it operate more like a business and like a political oversight board that is responsible to those of us who have to fight for those monies. That's basically what it does. It's entirely local in its nature.
Are there any questions for Delegate Buckle? Okay, seeing none, thank you. That concludes the testimony on House Bill 768, House Bill 653, and Mr. Lamel Stovall, once again.
Outstanding.
You've been living in this committee.
We're bringing in the big guns for all the good bills. Thank you, Madam Chair. House Bill 653 relates to something that we've called the Maryland Technology Infrastructure Pilot Program. This was a bill that actually the House passed several years ago. It did not pass through the Senate. And it is a byproduct, as the Economic Investment Fund that I just described, it is a byproduct of our 2-year task force on the economic future of Western Maryland. This particular bill, we believe that TEDCO is a tremendous resource for the state of Maryland. They are best in class in trying to find ways to match entrepreneurs, existing businesses, new businesses to what Maryland has to offer and navigate pathways for financing, tax credits, and workforce development. We really need their participation. Our 3 western counties need TEDCO more, frankly, maybe, than some of the major counties here in the 95 corridor, because we don't have some of those existing business ecosystems and some of the private sector experts to help us grow these very important innovation economy and technology businesses. So what this would do is it allows TEDCO to create a pilot program focused on the 3 western counties and helping to develop our technology businesses. If I had a dream, I would leave the General Assembly tomorrow if I could snap my fingers and make this happen. I have a dream that somewhere in Montgomery County, Howard County, Anne Arundel County, wherever it may be, very, very intelligent people develop a product. They develop a pharmaceutical product, a biotechnology product, a cybersecurity product, an advanced manufacturing product. But because your land is so expensive to buy, it's so expensive to develop an industrial park where you live because of the high costs of things, you choose to say, that company chooses to say, I want to stay in Maryland and I want to produce this product. I want to grow my company, and I don't want to grow it in Virginia and just have my headquarters be in Rockville. I don't want to go to Pennsylvania. I want to grow it in Maryland. And those additive businesses, those manufacturing things, those support service networks, the expansion of the business comes to Washington County, comes to Allegheny County, comes to Garrett County. It's not that far away. It's literally, you can reach the borders of Allegheny County in about an hour and 35 minutes from Rockville. Well, maybe a little shorter if you drive the way I do. I shouldn't have said that on the record, but I drive a little fast sometimes. I acknowledge that. So what I'm suggesting to you is, we are your neighbors, and we're in your state, and we want to use programs like this to enable TEDCO to focus on and help us to grow with you and to become more aligned with our modern economy. Thank you, Madam Chair.
There we go. Delegate Buckle, thank you for your leadership on this. Troy Lamel Stovall, CEO of TEDCO, again. Look, we were active participants with the Western Maryland Task Force. Western Maryland is a very important part of what we are about. And I want to take to that point, read our mission statement. Enhance economic empowerment by fostering an inclusive and entrepreneurial innovation ecosystem to identify, invest in, and help grow technology companies in Maryland, technology and life science companies in Maryland. That's what this bill will help us do, and it is part of again, it's another tool. I used that before with Delegate Chief's bill. This is another tool that we believe that we need. And I will also leave you with a lot of you, and we've talked about the investment, the $1 billion investment people talk about that happened in Massachusetts, and people talk about the Route 128, what happened. But what people don't talk about that we've studied is the investment that they made in their western part of their state to invest in opportunities in the more rural parts of their state that was part of the $1 billion, plus $1 billion that was made to grow the ecosystem around Boston. So we stand in support of House Bill 653 and welcome any questions.
I have a question for Delegate Buckle. Is Rockville your neighbor or West Virginia? Weren't you trying to succeed to West Virginia?
So I will tell you this, as I've said before.
Were you trying to succeed to West Virginia?
No, as Dana Jones well knows, I could
Okay.
walk from my law office into the state of West Virginia. That's not a lie. As Delegate Wilkins
I just recall
learned,
some rhetoric about you trying to succeed to West Virginia.
the next bill, we're going to talk about how that impacts us.
Okay.
Wait for it, Wait for it, Chair Atterbury. Wait for it. Let the suspense build.
Okay. Delegate Barnes has a legit question for you.
Is that true, Delegate Barnes?
I did, but you said don't ask a lot of questions on the bill you know that's not going to pass.
See? You see how it is? Just remember tomorrow when you're like, please get on that big revenues thing. I need you, man. I'm like, who? Who are you? I don't remember you. Who?
Now, but my question, I guess, is for Troy. What type of technology is emerging in that part of the state in which we need to put forth an initiative like this to help them out?
Thanks for that question. So when I first got here, I got a chance to go to Frostburg and spent the day at Frostburg, actually 2 days at Frostburg. And one of the things that some of the engineer scientists had done there is one of the bigger assets they have out there is coal ash, which they had a ton of coal ash. They have a company that's found a way to turn coal ash into green cement. If they really figure out how to do that, that is revolutionary. That is flat out revolutionary. So that is one of the technologies that we're waiting for them to come to bring it to scale because it's not quite ready for prime time. It's still kind of an early stage. But that's the kind of stuff that I can tell you that Frostburg has shown us that we want to invest. The other one is around logistics, Delegate Barnes. We think we've actually invested in a couple of companies out there that are supporting the emerging logistics enterprise that's happening. And that's a huge industry that we've been investing in the last couple of years.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah,
because,
go ahead.
no, go ahead, Delegate Buckle.
That really, what Troy's talking about, that really, I don't know if none of you know what coal ash is, so it's a byproduct of the use of coal. So our area is, we are one of only 2 counties in Maryland that have natural producing seams of coal. We have a tremendous, you have it in your areas too. If you had coal-fired power plants at some point in time, you have coal ash impoundments. It's the byproduct of it. It used to be called fly ash. Right, and so this company is actually, was originally based in Canada. They're trying to come to scale. They have revolutionary technologies that would enable you to take that, but you have to have a lot of it. You can't just have a little bit, which is why they want to center in places that have that resource abounding. And when he says green cement, what that means is an incredibly more environmentally friendly brand of cement that can be used for underwater construction and does not create toxins and chemicals for things like pilings for the Bay Bridge, and also has a much more significant impact from climate change. The production of cement actually causes a lot of carbon emissions. This process that they're trying to develop for green cement really reduces that. So it's a gamble. It's like anything else. I know you're an entrepreneur, Delegate Barnes. Sometimes you take a bet on something and you hope it works. That's the kind of thing you take a bet and it works, and we become a regional or global center for green cement. It's a game changer if it happened.
Yeah, no, listen, I'm very supportive of the bill. I just want to make sure that we are, when we start talking about technologies in different pockets of the state of Maryland, that we are looking at different sectors that, I don't know, specializes in different things. And that's why I was asking, how would this help in that Western Maryland part of the state? What technologies emerging there that we could say Western Maryland is known or specializes in this particular thing right here?
Right.
Absolutely.
And that's a big part of having Frostburg State. We have a 4-year public university. It's the only 4-year public university in the state, basically west of the Baltimore County, you drew Baltimore County down to Montgomery County along. It's the only one west of the state. It's a hidden resource. It's something we need to do a lot more with, but it's someone that TEDCO can pair with and they can bring in and develop it more as a research and development university over the years that really would be a game changer.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any further questions? Okay, thank you. That concludes the testimony on House Bill 653. Delegate Buckle, House Bill 765, and is Lee Beeman still with us?
He is.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. House Bill 765, I will state for the record in case anyone, Kevin's looking at me funny. I will be honest. Mr. Beeman is the Allegheny County Attorney. He also works with me in our community. The county attorney is a part-time position. He also works with our law firm. Allegheny County chose to send him down today, probably because he can sleep on my couch tonight if necessary, and they won't have to pay for a hotel room. So he is here with us today to testify about this bill. Chair Atterbury mentioned, and I know it's in a spirit of good faith, kind of jokingly about the relationship with West Virginia in our community. This bill stems for that realities for Washington County, Allegheny County, and to an extent Garrett County. We really do live incredibly close to 2 other states, West Virginia and Pennsylvania, that do not have many of our environmental and regulatory laws. I'm not suggesting who's wrong and who's right. It really doesn't matter to me. What matters is we have a dearth of residential housing construction, and we have communities on either side of us in West Virginia and Pennsylvania that are experiencing upticks in residential construction. Oftentimes, where do those people work? In Allegheny County. Oftentimes, where do those people even send their children to school? Sometimes private schools, sometimes they pay a public school tuition rate to send them in Allegheny County. Where do they go to the hospital? In Allegheny County. Where do they shop? In Allegheny County. Where do they live and pay property taxes and generate tax base? In Mineral County, West Virginia, Bedford County, Pennsylvania, Somerset County, Pennsylvania. Why? Because the cost of how to construct a house is somewhat higher in Allegheny County than it is in our neighboring states. And why is that? Because we have sprinkler requirements, we have septic system requirements, we have a variety of other regulatory rules imposed by the state that Pennsylvania and West Virginia do not have. So you can essentially consider yourself to be a regional resident of Cumberland, Maryland, Frostburg, Maryland, Hagerstown, Maryland, and live and sleep at night in West Virginia and Pennsylvania. It's that close. And so in order to incentivize our builders and our construction industry and our new home buyers, this tax credit, the county has to provide a credit. It's not just all the state, and the state provides a credit If you're building homes to be used as primary homes, these aren't vacation homes, it's not Deep Creek Lake $1 million mansions. These are primary homes to get people to move and stay and connect in the 3 western counties. And you have to put in, either the sprinkler system, the on-site sewage disposal system, or a fixed broadband internet. We have a problem with that. We're dealing with broadband. We're trying to incentivize people to say, we're bringing your house up to code. It's a 21st century house. You'll get people in the building industry say, I can build that house for you in, let's say, Allegheny County. It costs $350,000. I can build it for you in Mineral County, West Virginia. It costs $290,000. Which one are you going to go to? So this won't solve that problem, but that's the design and the direction of it, is to provide this a fairly minor credit. I think that the state impact of the credit is estimated to be really fairly small. It's not a multi-million-dollar loss to the state revenue, but we think it would incentivize residential construction and growth in our communities, as opposed to what frankly infuriates me sometimes, that all of the growth is 10 minutes away. I consider it to be where I live, but it's in another state. That's just the reality. So thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. And Mr. Beeman, you have the same name as a gentleman from one of my favorite movies, Willie Beeman, from Any Given Sunday. For some
There you go.
reason, all I can think of, Willie Beeman.
It's the inches that are all around us.
All right.
Madam Chair Atterbury, Madam Vice Chair Wilkins, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to appear here. Again, Lee Beeman, I'm the county attorney for Allegheny County. I appear today on behalf of the Allegheny County Commissioners, and do want to highlight that while the fiscal note for this policy points out that this is a mandate on local government, Allegheny County stands ready to assume that mandate and to assume the revenue loss and the administrative costs that are associated with the fiscal note for this bill. And we do that as a tool to attempt to spur economic development in Allegheny County. The General Assembly has graciously, in recent years, contributed to economic development in Allegheny County. But what we have is a chicken and egg situation. While we are developing further jobs, we're in great need of homes for those employees. This statistic here, I believe, is extremely telling. In 1994, 144 new homes were built in Allegheny County. 2,065 homes were built. In 2022, 17 new homes were built in Allegheny County. In neighboring Mineral County, we have a development known as Lakewood. Delegate Buckle was referencing that. There were 8 new homes built in the Lakewood development,
just the one,
5 minutes away from Allegheny County. Delegate Buckle mentioned the regulations that impose difficulties on Allegheny County compared to neighboring counties. They're literally a stone's throw away, and we are losing homes to people who choose to live in neighboring areas as a result of the differing financial costs. This credit, on behalf of Allegheny County, and we ask the state to join that effort, would allow us to attempt to incentivize homeowners to build in Allegheny County. And we ask that you support and give a favorable recommendation for House Bill 765. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for Mr. Beeman? Yes, Ms. Jones.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Lee, it's good to see you again. Just, we talk about minutes, how far the neighboring counties are, and since I was brought into it, literally how many miles is it to get to Mineral County, and how many miles is it to get to Bedford?
So from downtown Cumberland, if you ever drive through the city of Cumberland on the highway, I'm not joking when I say you can walk to West Virginia. It's less than a mile, a quarter of a mile to cross the bridge. That's where the Potomac River divides the states. For many places, from where I actually live in the suburbs on the outskirts of Cumberland, I can get to West Virginia in 2 to 5 minutes, depending upon traffic. Other parts of the area of Frostburg is more northern, so it's more towards the Pennsylvania side. You can get from Frostburg and cross the Mason-Dixon line and be in Pennsylvania in 5 minutes. Mr. Beeman lives in Frostburg. Approximately 5 minutes. You can't walk from Frostburg to Pennsylvania, but it's close. You could get from my house to Pennsylvania in less than 5 minutes.
Oh,
It's really extremely close. He mentioned the Lakewood development. It is a beautiful development. I'm sure many of your communities, they build an artificial lake. I don't want to live in West Virginia, but if I had the ability to serve politically,
Well,
it's
might
I
need to
can
pull up
tell
the
you. I
record.
mean, it's the nicest, most modern development that's been built within 30 miles of Cumberland since the 1980s, 1990s. And again, I would venture to say 85 to 90% of the people who are there work in Maryland or have Maryland-based interests. That's just where they built their house, and we're suffering because of it.
Thank you.
Delegate Feldmark.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have a clarifying question. Is this meant to be enabling or requiring?
I think that it would be mandatory for if the counties want to get the state money, if they want to get the state credit, they have to enact their own property tax credit. We're not paying for it, it's a shared program.
Right.
So if they don't enact a program to give the county property tax credit, we're not giving them any credit for the state portion.
Okay, I guess I understand they have to do the county portion to be eligible for the state portion. But are we actually requiring them to do this? Because that's how I read paragraph B, but then later it sounds permissive.
Yeah,
Right.
and I think that's something we could certainly
Okay.
flesh out, to further consideration of the bill. I think the way that we want to do it, the way that makes sense is to say, you can choose not to participate in this program if you're one of the 3 western counties, but if you do, you have to provide your local property tax credit, but it's not all just coming from the state.
Right, okay. Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
That concludes the testimony on House Bill 765. Delegate Griffith, House Bill 767, and is David Weber with us?
Well, it's definitely very difficult, but it's an honor to succeed the minority leader on this panel, so I, I appreciate that. Hey, for the record, my name is Delegate Mike Griffith, and I'm here to present HB 767, Subtraction Modification, Military Retirement Income, Military Pension Tax Freedom Act. I know this is the 4th iteration of this bill that we've heard this year, so I'm not going to go down too far down a rabbit hole. I would like to recognize the anniversary of this bill. This is the 20th anniversary of this bill. This bill was first introduced under the Ehrlich administration in 2003. So it's something we've been working on for a long, long time. And I was extremely heartened when I saw not only 2 of my colleagues, but also the governor introduce bills along these lines that we're looking to move the ball down the field and help make Maryland a safe haven for our veterans. I think it's absolutely about time and the right thing to do. But like anything, it's not just where we are or where we're going to be, but where we want to be. And I understand certainly if any of these bills are going to pass, it's going to be the governor's bill. And I support that bill, and I'm excited to see that happen. But our ultimate goal is to completely eliminate the military retirement tax. And we need to keep that conversation going, even in light of what hopefully the General Assembly is about to do. And we're going to continue this conversation, continue to try to get to where we want to be. If you look at the physical notes between Governor Moore's bill that gets to $40,000 and the full repeal, apples and apples on the physical note, because the original version of this bill and the physical note speaks to a phased-in 5-year repeal. In 2028, there's only a $15 million difference from where Governor Moore's bill goes and where the full repeal goes. That's it. We're that close. And that's very exciting that the governor's bill will bring us that close to what we all want to see, which is the full repeal of the military retirement tax. And as we know, our veterans, I'm a veteran, I didn't retire, so this wouldn't benefit me. But many veterans retire at 37, 38 years old after 20 years in the military. And that's if you're not retired for a medical reason or psychological reason. And so at 37, 38 years old, you have an entire career in front of you to work, to contribute to the workforce, to bring your skills directly and inject your abilities and training right into our workforce and the trades, nursing, I mean, cyber, it goes on and on and on. So with that being said, again, you know, we understand it's going to likely be the governor's bill if a version of this is going to pass. We want to make sure we're continuing this conversation. And with that said, I would urge a favorable report on HB 767. Thank you.
Like Delegate Griffith said, this is like the fourth iteration of this. My name is David Weber. I'm an Army veteran resident of Annapolis. I'm here representing AARP Maryland. We do also support House Bill 767. We do place priority on House Bill 554, the governor's bill. However, this is a phenomenal bill. We do respectfully request the favorable report for House Bill 767.
We like that kind of testimony. Any questions? Okay, thank you. Seeing none, that concludes the testimony. House Bill 767, calling House Bill 668. Delegate Allen. Welcome to Ways and Means. Is this your first bill hearing?
It is, Madam Chair.
What?
Yes. Thank you, thank you. Let's not applaud too early.
If there's anyone you want to bring up, you can. I have Mary Drexler, Brian Rusine, and then there's one person signed up virtually to testify. We'll bring in when the three of you are done.
Sounds good. All right, thank you, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, members of the Ways and Means Committee. For the record, my name is Delegate Nick Allen, and I'm here to testify in support of House Bill 668, which deals with the Maryland Problem Gambling Fund. In Maryland, as we have steadily expanded the ways people can legally gamble, the General Assembly has simultaneously ensured a funding stream to address the problems that arise for people who cannot limit their participation. In legislation this body passed in 2007, we ensured funding would go to the Problem Gambling Fund with the allowance of slot machines or video lottery terminals. In 2012, we ensured funding would go to the Problem Gambling Fund when we then expanded to table games. This legislation neglected, however, to create an effective funding stream with the expansion to sports wagering in the past year. That's what this bill seeks to address. This bill does two main things. Number one, it directs 1% of the proceeds from sports wagering in the state lottery fund to the Problem Gambling Fund. When the General Assembly legalized sports wagering in Maryland, it specified that any funds that were not claimed 182 days after the wager is won would go to the Problem Gambling Fund. The unforeseen problem, or maybe perhaps it should have been foreseen, is that 90% of people place their sports bets online. Unlike lottery tickets, where a winner has to go to the retailer to claim their prize, the payout when a person places a bet online goes directly to the account the player has established with the sportsbook operator. Again, unlike a small portion of lottery winnings, online prizes never go unclaimed. There are currently exactly $0 in unclaimed funds for the vast majority of sports wagering in Maryland. The 1% proposal in this legislation will correct that unexpected error so that Maryland can be more adequately funded to support those who need help. And we need more resources. The latest gambling prevalence study conducted in Maryland in 2020, that is before sports book betting was legalized, showed a substantially higher prevalence than in the surveys conducted in 2017 and 2010. There's little doubt that the incidence of problem gambling will continue to grow as we make it easier for people to gamble in many different ways. Second, the bill requires each video lottery operations licensee to pay an annual $500 fee for each table game, with the money going into the Problem Gambling Fund. This is important because casinos have removed other table games and VLTs to make room for their sports books. This has resulted in a reduction in the funding for the Problem Gambling Fund, and this reduction has meant Maryland has been investing less and less in the resources needed to help Marylanders suffering the harms of gambling addiction. This fee increase will allow those programs funded by the Problem Gambling Fund to continue working at their usual capacities. Let's make sure we're providing the resources to address the problem. Thank you, my friends and colleagues, and I respectfully request a favorable report on 668, and I look forward to answering any questions you may have.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Mary Drexler, and I am the director of the Maryland Center of Excellence on Problem Gambling, here today to testify in strong support of House Bill 668. The center is fully funded by the Problem Gambling Fund to promote healthy and informed choices regarding gambling and problem gambling. We take a public health, multi-pronged approach to our work. Our services include a 24-hour helpline, public awareness on the issue of problem gambling clinical training, peer recovery support services, prevention and community outreach, public policy input, and research and evaluation. I want to give you just a small snapshot of what we have been experiencing since sports betting legalization. The center employs 5 certified peer recovery support specialists who are in recovery from problem gambling and connect with many of those who call our helpline. On average, more than 400 people across the state reach out to our peer specialists annually. Recently, the center is definitely seeing an increase in helpline calls since sports betting went live last year, and are seeing more pressure on the staff and the need for more staff and peers to keep up with the demand. Sportsbooks also have big marketing and advertising budgets that far surpass what's in the Problem Gambling Fund. The center needs to continue targeted counter-marketing and public awareness campaigns to ensure Marylanders are aware of the resources available should gambling activity become a problem. Sports betting also generally attracts a younger demographic. Thus, our public awareness and marketing needs to expand to include new forms of media to reach this demographic. We have a network currently of 131 behavioral health treatment providers offering no-cost treatment, but that is not sufficient to meet the current demand. We continue to outreach to new providers. Simply put, additional funding, 1% of the proceeds from sports wagering in the lottery fund, should have been built in, which should have probably been built in from the start, is necessary for us to not only continue the work we've been doing, but to meet the expanding needs that have arisen from sports betting legislation. I strongly request a favorable report on HB 668.
Hello, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Brian Racine. I'm currently a student in the Public Health Law Clinic at the University of Maryland School of Law, here to testify in support of House Bill 668. I will be discussing how across the country, legalizing sports wagering has exacerbated the problem gambling issue in every state, what states are doing in response to that trend, and why Maryland must follow suit and increase their dedicated funding for problem gambling services and treatment. So since 2018 to 2021, the National Council on Problem Gambling estimated there was a 30% increased risk for problem gambling. This is significant due to the fact that in 2018, the Professional and Amateur Sports Protection Act was overturned, which removed the federal prohibition on allowing states to legalize and regulate sports wagering. Since legalizing sports wagering, states across the country have all seen a rapid uptick in problem helpline calls, and a study conducted by the National Council on Problem Gambling found a strong correlation between the amount of problem gambling helpline calls and problem gambling prevalence within the state. In response to this data and these trends, many states around the country have begun to include dedicated funding in their sports wagering legislation for problem gambling treatment and services, with the recommended best practice by the National Council on Problem Gambling being 1% of sports wagering revenues. The neighboring states of Virginia and Pennsylvania have been leading the way in this regard, with Virginia dedicating 2% of their sports wagering revenue to problem gambling treatment and services. And they did so because they wanted to boost their per capita spending on problem gambling treatment and services. As Delegate Allen stated, the Maryland Gambling Prevalence Study revealed that there was a 0.7 to 3.1 increase in problem gambling, and because of that, Maryland must follow the suit with these states and increase their dedicated funding for problem gambling treatment and services. As when Marylanders overwhelmingly voted in support of sports wagering legalization, an obligation also came with that to treat the problem gamblers. I respectfully request for a support on House Bill 668.
Thank you. And we have one person signed up virtually, Nancy Rosen Cohen. Okay, we can see you.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chairwoman. As everyone has said, I'm the Executive Director of the National Council on Alcoholism and Drug Dependence. We ask for a favorable support on House Bill 668. We certainly don't want to take monies away from the education fund, but we have to understand that gambling is an addiction and that it affects everybody in a family. and people that are related. People can lose their homes, they can lose their jobs. And because of that, we want to be able to have revenue to help support these people. So in other words, it can be devastating, the whole problem gambling. But if we can give the 1%, which is a very small percentage, to education and to assistance to the Center of Excellence on Problem Gambling, that will make a huge difference. And I think whenever you enact any type of gambling, we also have to talk about the help that we need to provide to individuals and to families. So I thank the sponsor for this. I thank Mary Drexler as the executive director of the Center on Problem Gambling. And I thank all of you as legislators and hope that you'll give a favorable report on a small 1% that would be very much needed. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Committee, are there any questions for Delegate Allen or any of his witnesses? Oh, you got a few questions here. Do any of you guys over there have any questions for? Okay, we're gonna have to figure out. There's so many questions. The lights aren't even lighting up.
Man.
Oh, you have a question? Oh, well, this is because it was your first bill.
I
So we
figured.
just okay.
As I saw them adding up, I added it up myself.
Does anybody actually have a question? Of course, Delegate Ebersol actually has a question. And then Delegate Charles.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Drexler, Mary Drexler, thank you for coming here today. And by the way, Delegate Allen, great idea. The casinos need to give us as much money as we can get out of them, okay? I am curious because I like the idea that you're locking down the amount for casinos and they're currently at about that level, but we want to make sure that they don't backslide. This money is important for us to get, and I firmly believe they can afford it. I'm a little concerned about taking money that would go to the blueprint. It looks like it will be starting about $500,000 and maybe go as much as to, actually I'm a little off on that. It's a little higher than that. But in any case, it's a large amount of money and the blueprint's going to suffer. So can you just give me an idea what the budget is for the Maryland Center for Problem Gambling for the year? Like how much we contribute and if you spend all of that?
I can tell you we spend it. Usually the Problem Gambling Fund has fluctuated, especially because COVID-19 was kind of in there in the middle, but anywhere from 4.5 million to 5 million, 5.5 million that's been available. Some of that comes directly to the center, but other funds go to the ASO for the treatment, the Problem Gambling Treatment Fund. Our current budget in this fiscal year is about 2.4 million that we get. I do have a staff of about 13 right now, but we have seen a definite increase where we were seeing maybe 6 to 10 calls to the helpline a week, now up to 20, 17 to 20 calls a week, a lot of them from young adults. 18 to 22, college age, that are more apt to do the mobile and online betting. And as I believe we said earlier, that's where they're betting on sports, is once it went mobile and online, that's where especially our young adults are going.
And so then, under this, the contributions from machines and from table games would stay about the same because the amount is about the same. You're just locking it down. But you could expect another $500,000 next year, and maybe I have 847, closer to a full $1 million for that. You feel like you could use that very well.
Well, and especially in our public awareness initiatives, it is not cheap to be doing public awareness and getting the word out there year long to the Maryland community, as with the expansion of legalized gambling. As you can tell if you watch any television about what's happening with mobile and online sports and the advertising power of the gaming industry, we can't afford to do that. So when we do some public awareness, we usually can afford to do about a month and a half with the current budget we have. We want to be able to make this year-long, reaching especially our eastern shore and western part of the state. There are gamblings all over. It's not just the brick and mortar casinos, but there are 13 licensed bingo halls. So there's an enormous availability to gamble now from your couch.
I go occasionally. Does lottery and gaming help you with the public awareness at all?
We are working collaboratively with Maryland Lottery and Gaming.
Budgetarily, I was asking.
Budgetarily,
Like,
no.
do they use some of their funds for that also?
They have, what they have done is they have taken some of what we produced and put it on TV.
So they would have paid for those advertisements?
Yeah, it would have been paid space that they had had.
Okay,
yes.
thank you very much. Thank you, Madam
You're
Chair.
welcome.
Okay, seeing no further questions. Delegate Charles?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Drexler, one of the questions I have is specific to the addiction portion of gambling. Most addicts don't think they have a problem, and that's one of the major problems that we're dealing with when you're addressing issues like this. Is there any type of crosswork that's happening with the casinos? I do realize that for some of the large gamblers, the casinos give them cards to track how much money you've gambled, so you can see, how well you're doing. Is there any type of communication with the casinos that showcases, all right, these folks are spending way too much money. They're gambling out $30,000, $40,000 a month, losing, huge numbers of dollars. Is there anything that you guys are doing to work with them to address that issue?
Yeah, we do have the Maryland Alliance for Responsible Gambling here in Maryland, which includes the Maryland Lottery and Gaming, all the casino managers, other entities or state entities interested in the issue of problem gambling. Yes, I do personally work with all 6 of the casinos on their responsible gambling efforts and ways. A lot of our materials are there. They're placed in places where people would know where to go and get help. Whether I have not been able at this point to get information on who might be the higher roller and would they be referring those individuals necessarily to the helpline. They do encourage their consumers. We do education of the employees of the casinos, especially March is National Problem Gambling Awareness Month. We are actually in the back of the house of every casino, educating the employees on what to look for with their patrons. Giving them even cards that they hold in their aprons if they're at the tables, if they know a player is getting out of hand, to give them information on maybe you need to stop, maybe you need to take a break. So we are collaborating with them. We're working diligently. We're making small steps.
Yeah, I think that probably be something we should look into, to have more dialogue as well with you and the casinos, especially because that's the target audience we want to capture with this problem gambling fund. Are the folks who are actually in there consistently gambling and possibly losing their paychecks each month. So
yeah, we're also working very closely with them on the voluntary exclusion program. So those are located in all of the casinos. So their staff are well educated on letting people know that they can sign up for that program actually in the casino. And we have included sports bet now on that application process.
And I did have just one last question on that. If you're in a bar and you're drinking and the bartender realizes that person is drinking way too much, they shut them off. Is that the case here? When they see someone is gambling way too much, do they shut them off within the casinos?
I think there may have been instances of that, but I don't know that that is common practice. I can't answer to that.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any other questions? Seeing none, I believe this ends the hearing for HB 668. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we're calling up Delegate Eversole for HB 584. And I have Colby Ferguson and Ann Waterstedt.
That's a bad concept.
I don't see your 2 favorables here.
Yeah, they may not have hung out. One of them said they couldn't make it. The other one I thought was online, but I'm not sure.
We do have one virtual signed up, and we'll look to see that person is here. So
That may be all I have. Yes.
Okay.
I apologize for this yesterday to freshmen. This is a bill you've seen before, but unlike the one that I gave you yesterday, this is a bill that has been highly successful. A number of years ago, a couple of legislators from Southern Maryland thought it'd be great to have a program like I'm about to describe to you. They had it apply to 7 counties. They called it a pilot, and I thought, well, 7's not really a pilot, and I tried to extend it to mine, and they said, if you mess up our bill, we're going to take you down. So, so I didn't add in Howard and Baltimore counties or any other counties that year, but the bill had a 2-year sunset, and by the time the sunset came up, both Sally Jamison and Mac Middleton were gone. And so I decided to pick up the mantle and extend this, but also extend it so that it would apply to every county in the state. This is a program that when a farmer has a tomato that doesn't look quite right or doesn't really look like it could go to market, one thing they can do with it is throw it away, okay? So people don't eat, and our garbage goes into the landfills, and Chesapeake Bay Foundation and all are behind me. They think it's great that we not be throwing food away. This offers, very simply, a straight-up tax credit to farmers who donate food. We started off discriminating between organic produce and regular produce. We still did in this bill, but I'm actually going to offer an amendment to say that we should just even it up. And so the bill, I'm going to ask for an extension of the sunset. I actually have an amendment that I hope the subcommittee will consider that would just say, let's just get rid of the sunset. This is really not that expensive. The program is capped at $100,000. It has never been fully subscribed. We are trying to find ways to get more farmers to participate. The Maryland Food Bank, which was in my district, now it's a stone's throw away from it, is there. And that's one of the reasons I took an initial interest, because the food bank likes the idea too. And so we built this bill, so it basically re-ups it. The bill says 75% for non-organic and 100% for organic. As I said, we would prefer now, if you would accept the amendment, to just make it 100% of the value, maximum $5,000 for the year, and go from there. If you remove the sunset, as I say, it's $100,000. It has fluctuated. We get a report from the comptroller every year between as low as the first couple of years, $13,000, $14,000. It has gotten as high as $50,000 or $55,000. If there's a way to get more farmers to do this, then I think it's a win-win all the way around. And I believe that the program will actually get stronger, and maybe one day we'll want to up the amount because it's going so great, okay, that we're actually getting all this good food. There is an uncodified section that asks the Department of Agriculture to help with transportation so farmers can get some help bringing their food, either by them picking it up or by reimbursing them for transportation costs to bring the food to the food bank. And with that, I would ask for a favorable report, and I would also hope that the subcommittee will consider the amendments that I've suggested.
Any questions? Oh, I'm sorry, we do have the virtual witness that is
Right,
there,
there he
so
is.
we'll go to the witness before we take questions. Keith Olinger.
Yeah, he's my hero.
Hello, can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
All right, great. My name is Keith Olinger. I'm a farmer in Howard County. I want to thank the chair and vice chair and the committee for allowing me to testify today. I want to thank Delegate Ebersol for sticking with me over these 5 years of trying to fix the program. We're sorry we lost you from Howard County in the redistricting. And I want to thank Delegate Feldmark for putting me in touch with Delegate Ebersol when I reached out to her about how to fix this program back in the day. I gave you some written testimony, which is a little more extensive, has some of the history, but regarding my participation in the program, I found out about this program back in 2019 when I was working with Amy Cawley at the Maryland Food Bank. We had a trucking issue. We weren't able to get the product over so much with Manna Food Center in Montgomery County for so many years that Jen Umbriak over there was able to set it up. We did a donation of a little over $5,000 of our product at the end of 2019, and again, a little over $5,000 in the beginning of 2020. What shocked us then, about a month later, when we got the response, Manna did their paperwork, I did my paperwork. We got the response, and it was half the value of the meat that we provided. And we found out that nowhere in any of the press releases or anything had they mentioned that it was only going to get half of what you were donating. So that was a bit of a shock, but the food was already in the system. It went to a good cause. There was no problem there. But then what happened was, insult to injury, it took them almost 2 years, 6 months, and 15 days for the comptroller's office. MDA submitted their product, their their documentation to the comptroller's office, but it took them that long to get us a donation from 2020. And so some of what happened with farmers, now Maryland, I did reach out to MDA, they did fix their website and farmers are now notified of it. But one of the challenges, obviously, you lose a big, sorry, I'm done.
Thank you so much for your testimony. We appreciate you taking the time, especially after a long day of hearings.
Madam Chair, if I may comment that I have great faith in our new comptroller for getting these payments out in a quick fashion. So we're very hopeful.
So do I. So do I. All right, we do have a couple questions. Delegate Charles.
Yep. Thank you, Madam Chair. So my question for you is in terms of the actual food banks themselves. I've been able to do about 200 plus food distribution events over the last 2 years, and we get a lot of our food from the Capital Area Food Bank. And I've been able to partner up with a nonprofit called Food for Thought, and they've been truly helpful in the community. Would this program, will the farmers, will they be able to donate specifically to programs like Food for Thought versus going to only Maryland Food Bank?
That's an excellent question. I think we just made it food banks in the state, so I'm not positive of that. I'd have to read the bill more carefully to see how our wording was on that. That'd be, farmers donate food and people eat it. I'd be for it. So if that's an amendment you're considering, if you feel like the language doesn't cover that, go for it, okay? Because I think the more organizations we involve, the more farmers will notice it. So I appreciate the suggestion.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Seeing none, that ends the hearing on HB 584, and that ends our hearings for today. Thank you. Very quickly before we fully adjourn, are there any announcements from the subcommittee chairs? And we will not be voting today, so enjoy the rest of your evening. We are adjourned.